file shouldn't have existed. Clara Rains had spent 3 years analysing radar anomalies for Sentinel Defence Analytics, cross-referencing FAA flight paths with weather patterns, satellite debris, and the occasional flock of geese that confused outdated tracking systems. She'd seen every kind of glitch, every data corruption, every bureaucratic mislabelling that could make a spreadsheet lie. But she'd never seen 3 separate federal databases, FAA, FEMA, and CDC, share the same incident code for events that had nothing to do with each other, until now. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March 2026 when the pattern emerged. Clara sat in her cramped Arlington apartment, the glow of dual monitors casting blue light across her face. Outside, the distant hum of the metro's last train faded into silence. She'd been running a routine check on rural radar anomalies, the kind of busy work that kept her contract renewed, when the algorithm flagged something unusual. 3 incidents, 3 different states, 3 different months. January 14th. Meteor sighting, Cisco, Utah. FAA logged unusual radar signature. Local fire department responded to reports of impact. FEMA designated it ENV-071KD. Follow-up. Closed within 18 hours. February 3rd. Mass illness event Durbin, West Virginia. CDC investigated reports of 17 residents experiencing identical hallucinations. Designation ENV-071KD. Follow-up. Attributed to contaminated well water. Case closed. March 9th. Missing persons. Loma, Montana. 4 hikers disappeared during clear weather. FEMA deployed emergency assessment team. Designation ENV-071KD. Follow-up. Individuals found disoriented but unharmed, no further action. The designation code was the hook. ENV-071KD didn't match any standard federal classification system. Clara had memorised FEMA's taxonomy during her first year at Sentinel. Every prefix, every suffix, every bureaucratic shorthand that turned disasters into data points. This code was wrong. Or more accurately, it was right in a way that shouldn't be possible. She pulled up the incident reports. Each one listed the same cleanup team in the footnotes. Department. 7 response unit. Clara opened a new browser tab and accessed the federal agency directory through her contractor credentials. She typed Department 7, no results found. She tried variations. Department 7, 7th Department, Division 7. She expanded her search to include the Office of Personnel Management Database, the Congressional Budget Office's agency listings, even the Freedom of Information Act reading room, and nothing. The clock read 12:33 a.m. Clara leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking in the silence. In Washington, agencies didn't simply not exist. Even the most classified operations, JSOC's Grey Fox, the NSA's Tailored Access Operations, the DOE's Nuclear Emergency Support Team, left paper trails, budget line items, redacted organisational charts, acronyms in appropriations bills. But Department 7 had no shadow, no trace, no echo in any database she could access. She should have closed her laptop and gone to bed, should have dismissed it as a data entry error, some clerk in 3 different agencies accidentally typing the same wrong code, should have remembered that curiosity was a liability in her line of work. Instead, she downloaded all 3 incident reports to an encrypted drive, cleared her browser history, and decided to dig deeper. That decision would be the last normal choice she'd ever make. Clara spent the next week building a timeline. She worked carefully, methodically, the way her father had taught her during the summer. He'd tried to get her interested in bird watching. Pattern recognition, he'd said, pointing to migration routes on a map. It's not about seeing one bird, it's about seeing where they all go. She pulled archived news reports from the 3 towns. Cisco, Utah. Local paper ran a brief story about the meteor, included a quote from a resident who described men in dark suits arriving before the fire department. The follow-up article, published 2 days later, made no mention of suits or federal agents, just a meteorite fragment donated to the local college. Durbin, West Virginia. Nothing in the news archives at all. Clara found a deleted social media post, cached by a web scraper, from a resident claiming government people had quarantined the elementary school for testing. The post had been removed within 6 hours. Loma, Montana. The missing hiker's story made regional news, but the official report was bland. 4 hikers from Seattle got separated from their trail group, spent a night in the woods, experienced mild hypothermia and confusion. A park ranger found them the next morning. The incident report listed no ranger's name. Clara cross-referenced the dates with satellite imagery from commercial providers. Cisco, thermal bloom consistent with impact, followed by ground vehicles arriving within 2 hours, at 3 a.m, long before local emergency services were notified. Durbin, no unusual activity visible, but cell tower data showed a 5-hour communications blackout in a 3-mile radius. Loma, cloud cover obscured the area during the critical 48 hours. Every lead led to a gap. Every question led to silence. On Thursday evening, Clara broke protocol. She called an old colleague from her graduate program at Georgetown, Marcus Webb, who'd taken a position with the Defense Intelligence Agency's Open Source Analysis Division. They met at a coffee shop in DuPont Circle, the kind of anonymous place where half the customers were having quiet conversations about things they shouldn't discuss in public. "You look like you haven't slept," Marcus said, stirring sugar into his espresso. "I need you to look up something for me," quietly. "I'm not pulling classified files, Clara. Not asking you to. Just check the DIA's unclassified organisational records. Tell me if you've ever heard of Department 7. Marcus frowned. "Department 7 of what?" "That's what I'm asking." He pulled out his phone, spent 2 minutes scrolling, then shook his head. "Nothing." "Why? You ever come across an incident code ENV071KD? "No, that's not a standard format." "Where'd you see it?" Clara hesitated. "Just something that crossed my desk. Probably nothing." Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "If it's probably nothing, why do you look scared?" She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "You ever hear stories about cleanup teams? Federal, but not from any specific agency? You mean like NEST? They're DOE? No, unmarked, just present when weird things happen, then gone." Marcus set down his cup. "Clara, if you've stumbled onto something operational, you need to report it through proper channels and then forget about it. Seriously, I've seen contractors lose their clearances for less. What if the proper channels don't acknowledge it exists? Then it definitely doesn't exist, and you should stop asking." He stood, leaving a 20 on the table. "I mean it. Some doors stay closed for good reasons." Clara watched him leave. She finished her coffee in silence, then took the metro back to Arlington, checking over her shoulder 3 times before entering her building. That night she found the photographs. She'd requested field documentation from the Cisco incident through a Freedom of Information Act query, a routine request that should have taken months to process. Instead, the response arrived in 4 days, a PDF containing 12 heavily redacted pages and 6 photographs. The photos showed the impact site: scorched earth, a shallow crater, scattered fragments of dark material, standard meteor documentation. But in the background of the third photo, Clara spotted something the redaction team had missed. 3 vehicles parked in formation, dark SUVs with no visible markings. She zoomed in. The resolution degraded, but she could make out a small emblem on the lead vehicle's door. White numbers on a black circular background. 7-13-4. Clara saved the image, enhanced it using forensic software, and confirmed what she'd seen. The badge was deliberately minimal, no agency name, no seal, just numbers. A designation that meant nothing to anyone outside a very specific circle. She ran the number sequence through pattern analysis. 7-13-4 could be a unit identifier, a radio call sign, a budget code. Or it could be nothing, random numbers chosen precisely because they conveyed no information. But if they meant nothing, why use them at all? Clara opened a secure document and began writing everything down. Every incident, every connection, every gap in the official record. She backed it up to 3 separate cloud services under false names, printed a hard copy, and sealed it in an envelope she hid behind her bathroom mirror. At 2:17 a.m, her phone rang. The number was blocked. Clara stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Silence. Hello? Nothing. Not even breathing. Just the faint hiss of an open line. Who is this? The call ended. Clara checked her phone logs. The incoming call didn't appear. No duration, no number, no record it had ever happened. She didn't sleep that night. Friday morning, Clara arrived at work to find an email waiting in her inbox. The sender was listed as Federal Records Compliance Office, an entity she'd never heard of. The subject line read, FOIA request number 2026-03-FAA-7719-DENIED. She opened it. Your request for field documentation regarding incident ENV071KD, Cisco, UT, has been reviewed and denied under 5 U.S.C. Section 552B1. The requested materials are classified in the interest of national security. No further information can be provided at this time. This denial is final and not subject to administrative appeal. Clara checked her FOIA tracking portal. Request number 2026-03-FAI-7719 didn't exist in the system. She'd never been assigned that number. More importantly, she'd already received the documents. She had them saved on her laptop. Someone was trying to erase what she'd already seen. Clara closed her email and opened a private browser window. She navigated to a file-sharing service and uploaded every document she'd collected, setting the folder to auto-delete in 72 hours unless she renewed it. Then she sent the link to herself at 3 different email addresses, including one she'd created in college and hadn't used in years. Insurance. She spent the day working on routine tasks, acting normal, laughing at a co-worker's joke about the office coffee machine, but every time someone walked past her cubicle, she tensed. At 4:30 p.m, her supervisor stopped by. Gerald Costner, a former Air Force intelligence officer who'd transitioned to the private sector and spent most of his time in meetings. He smiled, casual and friendly. Clara, you have a minute? Sure, what's up? Just wanted to check in. You've been putting in a lot of late hours this week, everything okay? Yeah, just trying to clear some backlog before the quarterly review. Good. Listen, I noticed you put in a FOIA request last week, Cisco Meteor thing. Clara's stomach tightened. Yeah, just routine. Wanted to see if there was any debris that might explain the radar signature. Find anything interesting? Not really. Pretty standard Meteor documentation. Gerald nodded, still smiling. Great. Hey, just so you know, FOIA requests need to be cleared through my desk first. Contractor policy. No big deal, just make sure to loop me in next time. Of course. Sorry about that. No problem. He tapped her cubicle wall twice, a casual gesture. Have a good weekend. Clara waited until he was out of sight before exhaling. She pulled up her company's contractor handbook and searched for the FOIA policy. There was no requirement to clear requests through supervision. Not for unclassified materials, which was what she'd requested. Gerald was lying. At 5 p.m, Clara packed her laptop, took the elevator down to the parking garage, and sat in her car for 10 minutes watching the exit ramp. No one followed her out. No unfamiliar vehicles lingered nearby. She drove home through rush hour traffic, taking random turns, doubling back twice. Nothing. She was being paranoid. Had to be. But when she arrived home and checked her apartment, she found her bathroom mirror slightly askew. The envelope she'd hidden behind it was gone. Clara stopped sleeping. She'd read somewhere that the human body could survive on 4 hours of sleep a night for weeks, but cognition degraded over time. She allowed herself 2-hour shifts, setting alarms, keeping her phone in her hand even while unconscious. Every creak in the building woke her. Every car door slam outside sent her to the window. She didn't go back to work on Monday. Instead, she called in sick, then drove to a public library in Silver Spring and used their computers to continue her research. The librarian barely glanced at her ID. Clara accessed the commercial satellite archives again, this time focusing on the Montana incident. Loma was a town of 487 people, surrounded by national forest, The kind of place where hikers went missing just often enough that local search and rescue teams had a routine. The 4 missing hikers, Sarah Donnelly, Marcus Price, Jennifer Torres and Kyle Hammond, had been experienced backcountry campers, all in their 30s, all from Seattle. The official Park Service report stated they'd been found 16 miles from their last known position, dehydrated and confused, with no memory of the intervening 31 hours. Medical evaluations showed elevated cortisol levels and minor abrasions, but nothing that explained their disorientation. Clara found a podcast that had covered the incident. The host interviewed a local sheriff who described the federal response as overkill for a simple rescue. When asked which agency had responded, the sheriff paused, then said, "They didn't say. Had badges, but I didn't catch the department." The podcast had been posted 3 weeks ago. Clara tried to access it now. The episode had been removed. The show's website listed all episodes except that one. She found a cached version through a web archive and downloaded the audio file. At timestamp 23:17, the sheriff said something she'd missed in the transcript. They set up a perimeter around the recovery site. Wouldn't let our people in until they'd secured the scene. I asked what they were securing. These were hikers, not criminals. Guy just looked at me and said, "Contamination protocol." Never explained what that meant. Contamination protocol. For missing hikers. Clara dug deeper into the background of the 4 individuals. Marcus Price's social media had gone dark after his rescue. His last post was from the trailhead, a photo of sunrise over the mountains. His Facebook profile still existed, but every post after the incident had been deleted. His friends' comments remained. "Glad you're okay, man. Call me when you can talk about it." She found a phone number for Marcus Price through a people search site and called it. The line rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His voice sounded tired. "This is Marcus. Leave a message." "Mr. Price, my name is Clara Rains. I'm a researcher looking into unusual federal responses to outdoor incidents. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your experience in Montana last month. Please call me back at this number. It's important." She left her burner phone number, a prepaid cell she'd bought with cash that morning. 3 hours later, it rang. "Hello? You called about Montana?" The voice was male, cautious, not Marcus Price. "Who is this?" "Doesn't matter. You need to stop asking questions about that. I just want to understand what happened." "No, you don't. Trust me, Marcus doesn't remember, and that's a mercy." "What do you mean he doesn't remember?" "I mean exactly what I said. Whatever they did to him, to all of them, it worked. He can't even talk about it without getting panic attacks. Leave it alone." "Who did something to him? Who are they?" The line went dead. Clara tried calling back. The number didn't connect. She sat in her car in the library parking lot, hands shaking. Someone was watching these incidents. Someone was intervening with witnesses, and someone knew she was asking questions. That night she found Major Emmett Crowley. Crowley's name appeared in a declassified Air Force memo from 1987, a routine personnel reassignment document that listed him as a radar technician, stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Clara found his name again in a 2003 Veterans Forum post, where he'd commented on a thread about unexplained radar contacts. His post had been deleted, but the quote remained in someone's reply. "We tracked them for years." The official story was always weather balloons or equipment malfunction, but some of us knew better. She tracked him through public records to a small town in New Mexico, where he'd retired 10 years ago. His address led her to a trailer park outside Roswell. Ironic, Clara thought, given the town's history. She drove 17 hours straight, stopping only for gas and coffee. The landscape shifted from green to brown, humid to arid, dense to sparse. By the time she reached Roswell, it was late afternoon, the sun turning the desert gold. Crowley's trailer was clean but weathered, a wind chime hanging by the door. Clara knocked 3 times before an old man answered. He was thin, maybe 70, with sharp eyes that assessed her immediately. "If you're selling something, I'm not interested." "Major Crowley?" "My name is Clara Rains. I need to talk to you about Department 7. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He glanced past her, scanning the empty street, then stepped aside. You'd better come in. The interior was sparse. A couch, a television, a bookshelf filled with aviation manuals and Tom Clancy novels. Crowley gestured to the couch and took a seat in a recliner opposite her. "How'd you find me?" "Public records. I'm a data analyst. Pattern recognition is what I do." "And what pattern led you to me?" Clara pulled out a folder containing printouts of everything she'd collected. 3 incidents, 3 different agencies responding with the same designation code, a clean-up team that doesn't exist in any federal database, and witnesses who either can't remember what happened or disappear from public record. Crowley took the folder, flipping through pages without comment. When he finished, he set it on the coffee table and leaned back. "You shouldn't be looking into this. Everyone keeps telling me that. No one tells me why. Because the people who run Department 7 are very good at making problems go away. And right now, you're a problem. So it does exist. Officially? Number? In practice?" He gestured at her folder. "You've already seen the evidence. They've been around since 1952, born out of Project Blue Book's classified annex. You know about Blue Book? Air Force program that investigated UFO sightings, closed in 1969. That's the public story. The truth is that Blue Book had 2 tracks. Track 1 handled the explainable stuff. Weather balloons, aircraft, Venus. Track 2 handled everything else. The cases where the physics didn't work. The cases where witnesses experienced shared delusions. The cases where something was left behind. Left behind by what? That's the wrong question. 7 doesn't care what causes the events. They care about containment. Their job is to maintain consensus reality. When something happens that contradicts what people believe is possible, 7 arrives and rewrites the scene. They're not covering up aliens or time travellers. They're erasing contradictions. Clara leaned forward. "What kind of contradictions?" Crowley stood and walked to his bookshelf. He pulled down a binder and handed it to her. Inside were photocopied documents, incident reports, budget memos, personnel rosters, all stamped with classification markings all decades old. 1974, Dulce, New Mexico. Entire town reported seeing geometric lights hovering for 6 hours. Hundreds of witnesses. News crews showed up. Then 7 arrived. Within 48 hours, every video was confiscated, every witness was interviewed, and the official story became military flares. A year later, half the witnesses couldn't remember seeing anything unusual. How is that possible? You'd have to ask them, but I've heard rumours. DARPA programs, neural interference tech targeted electromagnetic fields. They don't just erase evidence, they erase memory. Clara paged through the binder. Another incident. 1989, Shoshone National Forest. A group of hunters found a clearing where all vegetation had been desiccated overnight. The ground fused into glass. Department 7 response team arrived, declared the area contaminated and removed everything. Official explanation: lightning strike. "Why are you telling me this?" Clara asked. "Because you're already in their crosshairs, and maybe if you understand what you're dealing with, you'll be smart enough to stop." Crowley sat down again. "I spent 30 years tracking radar anomalies. I learned to recognise the pattern. Every few months something would happen. Time distortions, energy blooms, mass cognitive events. And every time, 7 would show up. They'd scrub the site, interview witnesses and disappear. I tried to compile a comprehensive report in 1995. 2 weeks later I was reassigned to a desk job in Alaska. The message was clear. But you kept records, copies, hidden, because I knew someone would eventually come asking." He looked at her carefully. "You're not the first. Over the years, a few others have stumbled onto the pattern. Journalists, researchers, people like you. They ask questions, dig too deep, and then they disappear. Not violently. They just stop. New jobs in other states, sudden career changes. Sometimes they seem fine, just uninterested in the topic anymore, like someone flipped a switch." Clara's hands felt cold. "What do I do?" "Stop. Right now. Delete everything. Forget this conversation and move on with your life." "And if I don't?" Crowley sighed. "Then you'll meet them eventually. And when you do, you'll have a choice. Most people choose to forget. It's easier that way." Clara stood, clutching the binder. Can I keep this? I made it for you. But understand, possessing those documents makes you a target. They've already noticed you. Now you're carrying proof. Then they already know everything. Probably. Crowley walked her to the door. Good luck, Miss Rains. I hope you're smarter than I was. She drove back to her hotel room and spent the night scanning every page of Crowley's binder. Incident after incident, stretching back decades. The details varied, but the pattern remained consistent. Anomalous event, witness reports, Department 7 response, immediate cleanup, official explanation, fading memory. By 4 a.m, Clara had compiled a timeline that spanned 70 years. If Crowley was right, Department 7 wasn't just responding to unusual events. They were maintaining a specific version of reality, one where certain things simply didn't happen. But why? And on whose authority? She needed to see them in action. The alert came through on a Thursday morning. Clara had set up monitoring scripts across multiple platforms, FEMA dispatch channels, local news wires, social media, even amateur radio frequencies. She was looking for patterns, sudden federal mobilization, unexplained communications blackouts, stories that appeared and then vanished. At 7:43 a.m, her system flagged a cluster of social media posts from Thornton, Montana, population 1,122, located in a valley surrounded by national forest. The post described pillars of light visible above the tree line, lasting approximately 20 minutes before fading. One user posted a blurry photo showing vertical columns of luminescence, like aurora borealis constrained to narrow beams. By 8 a.m, several posts had been deleted. By 8:30, the local news site removed its brief article about the phenomenon. Clara checked FEMA's dispatch logs, no activity. FAA radar showed no unusual contacts. Weather Service reported clear skies. But at 9:15 a.m, her monitoring script caught a spike in encrypted radio traffic in the area, using frequencies associated with federal emergency response. She was in her car within 10 minutes. Thornton was a 9-hour drive from Roswell. Clara pushed her rental car to 80 miles per hour across empty highways, stopping only once for gas and energy drinks. She reached the Montana border by evening, the sky dimming to purple as she navigated through increasingly rural terrain. She arrived at Thornton just before midnight. The town was dark, most houses unlit, a single gas station glowing like a beacon on the main street. Clara parked at a motel on the edge of town and checked in under a false name, paying cash. In her room, she assembled her equipment, a digital camera with a telephoto lens, a radio scanner, binoculars, and a small drone she'd purchased 3 days ago. The drone was consumer grade but had a decent camera and could fly for 30 minutes on a single battery. At 1:30 a.m, Clara drove to the location where the light pillars had been reported, a forestry road leading to a hilltop with a view of the valley. She parked half a mile away and hiked the rest of the distance, carrying her equipment in a backpack. The hilltop offered a clear view. Below, Thornton spread out in a grid of streetlights and dark houses. Beyond it, the forest stretched into darkness. Clara set up her camera and waited. At 2:47 a.m, headlights appeared on the road below. 3 vehicles, dark SUVs moving in formation, no emergency lights, driving with deliberate speed. They turned onto a side road leading into the forest, toward the area where the light pillars had been reported. Clara launched the drone, keeping it low, using the trees as cover. The infrared camera showed the vehicles stopping in a clearing 2 miles into the forest. Figures emerged, 6 people in plain dark clothing, moving with practiced efficiency. They unloaded equipment from the vehicles, metal cases, tripods, devices Clara didn't recognize. One person set up a perimeter using what looked like portable fencing. Another assembled a sensor array on a telescoping pole. Clara zoomed in with her camera. The vehicles had badges on their doors. Even in low light she could make out the design. A black circle, white numbers, 7-13-4. She was watching Department 7 work. For the next hour, Clara documented everything. The team moved methodically, scanning the clearing with handheld devices, collecting samples of soil and vegetation, assembling what looked like lead-lined containment pods. One person stayed by the vehicles holding a tablet, occasionally speaking into a radio. At 4:15 a.m, Clara noticed something. One of the team members was looking around, scanning the tree line. He raised binoculars and pointed them directly toward her position. She froze. The man lowered his binoculars and raised one hand. He waved. Clara's breath caught. She was 300 yards away, concealed in darkness behind trees. There was no way he could see her, but he'd waved directly at her. She recalled the drone, packed her equipment, and ran back to her car. Her hands shook as she started the engine. She drove back to the motel, watching her mirrors, expecting headlights to appear behind her. Nothing. In her room, Clara immediately transferred the drone footage and photos to her encrypted cloud storage. She reviewed the images, zooming in on every detail. The team's equipment was unmarked. The vehicles had no license plates, just federal government tags with alphanumeric codes. She checked her camera's GPS data. Every photo she'd taken showed the correct location coordinates except for one, the image of the man waving. That photo's GPS coordinates placed it in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Impossible. Clara packed everything, checked out of the motel at 5:30 a.m. and started driving south. She wanted to put distance between herself and Thornton, get back to populated areas, somewhere with witnesses, somewhere safe. At 6 a.m. she stopped at a diner for coffee. While waiting for her order, she checked her phone. 3 new emails, all from addresses she didn't recognise, all sent within the last 20 minutes. She opened the first one. It was empty except for an attachment. The photo of the man waving at her. The same photo she'd just taken. But this version was different. The timestamp showed it had been taken 2 minutes before she'd pressed the shutter. The second email contained a satellite image of the hilltop where she'd been standing, marked with a red circle. The image was time-stamped 2:46 a.m, 1 minute before the vehicles had arrived. The third email had no attachment, just one sentence. "You're very good at this." Clara deleted the emails, paid for her coffee without drinking it, and got back in her car. She drove for 3 hours, taking random exits, changing directions, before finally stopping at a rest area outside Billings. Her laptop was in the trunk. She opened it, expecting to find her files intact. Every photo from Thornton was gone. The drone footage, deleted. The cloud backup, empty. Her car's GPS history had been wiped, but her documents folder contained one new file, rains_c_event_log.pdf. Clara opened it. Inside was a complete dossier on her. Her education, employment history, security clearance application, every FOIA request she'd ever filed, her home address, her parents' names, her college transcripts, photos of her at work, at home, driving her car. The last page contained a single line. Department 7 extends its regards. Below that, a phone number. Clara stared at the screen. They weren't threatening her. They were introducing themselves. She closed the laptop and sat in her car, watching trucks rumble past on the interstate. She should run, should disappear, should take Crowley's advice and forget everything. Instead, she took out her burner phone and dialed the number. It rang once. "Hello, Clara." The voice was male, calm, professional. "We've been expecting your call." The man on the phone called himself Agent D. Marrow. He didn't offer a first name, didn't explain what the D stood for. He spoke with the measured tone of someone accustomed to delivering information that wouldn't be questioned. "You've done impressive work," he said. "Most people stop after the first warning. You kept going." "Who are you?" "I think you already know the answer to that. Department 7, in a manner of speaking. The designation is more of a filing convention than an official name. We operate under various administrative codes depending on the fiscal quarter and operational requirements. You're telling me you're real. We're as real as we need to be. Would you like to meet in person? I think we have things to discuss." Clara's instinct was to refuse. Every thriller she'd ever read, every conspiracy documentary she'd watched, taught her that accepting such an invitation was how people vanished. But she'd already crossed too many lines. They had her home address, they had her files. Running wouldn't help. Where? Denver. Tomorrow. There's a federal building at 1961 Stout Street. 4th floor, room 447. come alone, and if I don't, then you'll continue your investigation, we'll continue monitoring you, and eventually you'll end up somewhere unfortunate. I'd prefer to have a conversation instead." The line went dead. Clara drove to Denver, arriving late that night. She checked into a hotel downtown and didn't sleep. Instead, she spent hours reviewing everything she knew, preparing questions, trying to anticipate what Marrow would say. At 9 a.m, she stood outside 1961 Stout Street. The building looked like any other federal office. Grey concrete, minimal windows, a bored security guard at the front desk. She showed her ID, stated she had an appointment on the 4th floor, and was waved through without question. The elevator opened onto a quiet hallway. Room 447 was at the end, unmarked except for the number. Clara knocked. "Come in." The room was small, furnished with a metal desk, 2 chairs, and nothing else. No computer, no phone, no files. Agent D. Marrow sat behind the desk. He was perhaps 50, with greying hair and glasses, dressed in a plain grey suit. He looked like an accountant. "Miss Raines." "Please sit." Clara took the chair opposite him. "You're Department 7. I represent the organisational structure currently designated as such. Though, as I mentioned, the designation is temporary. Next quarter will likely operate under a different budget code, embedded within a different parent agency. Why the shell game? Accountability is complicated when your mission involves information control. We exist in the gaps between agencies. Sometimes we're DOE responding to radiological incidents. Sometimes we're USGS investigating seismic anomalies. Sometimes we're CDC handling contagious cognitive phenomena. The designation changes. The work remains the same. Contagious cognitive phenomena? Marrow folded his hands on the desk. Reality is more fragile than most people understand. Occasionally events occur that contradict accepted physics. Not alien invasions or supernatural occurrences, just anomalies, time distortions, energy blooms that don't match any known source, mass hallucinations with no chemical basis. These events create cognitive dissonance. If left unaddressed, they spread. People talk. Stories grow. Belief systems fracture. So you erase the evidence? We contextualize it. We provide plausible explanations that maintain social cohesion. A meteor becomes a weather phenomenon. A mass hallucination becomes contaminated water. Missing time becomes hypothermia. We're not hiding the truth. We're preventing chaos. Clara leaned forward. You're rewriting reality. We're maintaining consensus. There's a difference. Is there? Marrow opened a desk drawer and removed a folder. He placed it in front of Clara. Before we continue, I want to show you something. She opened the folder. Inside was a photograph. Herself, maybe 9 years old, standing in front of a suburban house. Behind her, partially visible in the background, was a black SUV with a circular badge on the door. What is this? North Carolina, 2003. Your neighbourhood experienced a localised temporal distortion. 17 families reported identical dreams. Clocks ran backward for 40 minutes, and your father called 911 claiming he'd lived the same Tuesday twice. We responded. We cleaned up, and we ensured no one remembered clearly enough to spread the story. Clara stared at the photo. She had no memory of this, but she remembered that house, that year, and she remembered her father acting strangely for weeks afterward. You did something to my father. We offered him a choice, the same choice I'm offering you now. Which is? Marrow retrieved another folder. Department 7 is always looking for analysts, people who can see patterns others miss, people who are already compromised, who've seen too much to go back to normal life. You're exactly the kind of person we need. You want me to join you. I want to offer you a future. You can't unknow what you've discovered. You can't publish it. No one would believe you, and we'd intervene before any story gained traction. You can't run. We'll find you. You can't hide. You already live in our database. But you can be useful. You can help us maintain stability. You can be part of the solution instead of a problem to be solved. And if I refuse? Marrow's expression didn't change. We have a process for that. Neural interference technology, derived from DARPA's cognitive security research. It's not mind control. It's more like data reconciliation. We can't erase specific memories, but we can make them feel unimportant, like a dream you can't quite remember. Within a week, you'd lose interest in this investigation. You'd move on, get a new job, maybe relocate, live a normal life. You'd lobotomize me. We'd help you forget an obsession that's destroying your life. Many people find it merciful. Clara stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. I need time to think. Of course. Take 24 hours. I'll be here tomorrow, same time. Come back with your decision or don't come back at all. Either way, the outcome is already determined. She walked out without responding. Clara spent the day driving aimlessly through Denver, trying to process what Marrow had told her. Every option led to the same place. Department 7 controlled the outcome. Join them or forget them. Comply or be erased. There was no third path. She thought about her father. Had he been given the same choice? Had he accepted the erasure, traded his memories for peace? She called her parents that evening. Clara, honey, is everything okay? Her mother sounded worried. I'm fine. Is Dad there? He's in the garage. Hold on. Her father's voice came on the line, warm and familiar. Hey kiddo, what's up? Dad, do you remember anything strange happening when I was 9? In North Carolina? A long pause. Strange how? I don't know, just anything unusual, around the neighbourhood. Can't think of anything. Why? No reason, just something I was trying to remember. They talked for a few more minutes. Superficial conversation before Clara hung up. Her father remembered nothing. Either the Department 7 had been thorough, or he'd chosen to forget. That night, Clara sat in her hotel room with her laptop staring at the empty folders where her evidence had been. She could walk away, accept the erasure, wake up in a week with no memory of Department 7, no obsession with patterns, no fear of unmarked vehicles, a normal life, or she could join them, become part of the system that erased truth, help maintain the comfortable lie that kept society stable. Neither option felt like freedom. At midnight she made her decision. She didn't go back to room 447 the next morning. Instead, she drove to the airport and bought a ticket to Seattle. She turned off her phone, paid cash for everything, and tried to disappear into the crowd. For 3 days, it worked. She stayed in cheap motels, avoided cameras, moved constantly. But on the 4th day, she woke up in a Portland motel room and knew immediately that something was wrong. The room felt different. Her belongings were arranged slightly differently than she'd left them. Her laptop was closed, she'd left it open. She tried to turn it on. Dead battery, though. She'd charged it overnight. Clara grabbed her bag and headed for the door. In the parking lot her rental car was gone. In its place a taxi sat with its engine running. The driver rolled down the window. Miss Rains, I'm here to take you to the airport. I didn't call a taxi. I know, please get in. Clara ran. She made it 2 blocks before exhaustion overtook her. She collapsed on a park bench, gasping, and realised she couldn't remember when she'd last eaten. How long had she been running? 3 days? 4? The taxi pulled up beside her. The driver got out. Not a driver. Agent Marrow, wearing casual clothes, looking concerned. You chose the hard way, he said. Most people do. Clara woke up in a white room. Not a hospital. There were no medical instruments, no monitors. Just a bed, a chair, a small table. The door had no handle on the inside. Marrow entered an hour later, carrying a paper cup of coffee. How are you feeling? Clara said nothing. You've been here for 2 days. We've been monitoring your vitals, making sure you're healthy. No one's hurt you. Where am I? A federal medical facility, location classified. You're not a prisoner, Clara. You're a patient receiving treatment for acute stress disorder. I don't have a stress disorder. Your behaviour suggests otherwise. 3 days of paranoid flight, irregular sleeping patterns, signs of psychosis. It's all documented. He set down the coffee. This is what I was trying to avoid. You made it harder than it needed to be. What did you do to me? We initiated the reconciliation process. It takes about a week. Your memories of the Department 7 aren't gone. They're just becoming less important. like background noise. Soon you won't care about any of this. Clara tried to focus, but her thoughts felt slippery. She could remember Thornton, the photographs, Crowley's trailer, but the urgency was fading. Why had she been so obsessed? It seemed distant now, unimportant. Fight it, she whispered to herself. Don't, Marrow said gently. It's easier if you let go. Over the next 3 days, Clara's grip on her investigation weakened. She could recall facts, but couldn't summon the drive to care. Department 7 existed. So what? Lots of classified programs existed. Why had she thought it mattered? On the 6th day, Marrow visited again. We're releasing you tomorrow. You'll have a new job waiting, data analysis for a private firm in Austin. Good pay, benefits, fresh start. Your apartment in Arlington has been cleared out. Your parents have been told you're relocating for work, everything's arranged. What about my files, my research? Gone. We've removed every trace, it never happened. Clara nodded. That seemed reasonable. But that night, alone in the white room, a fragment of memory surfaced. Her father, speaking to her when she was 9. Sometimes you have to remember things even when people tell you to forget. Pattern recognition isn't just about what you see, it's about what you hold on to. Had he said that? Or was she imagining it? She closed her eyes and tried to visualize her evidence. The 3 incidents. ENV071-KD. The badge numbers 7-13-4. The man waving at her in Thornton. The email, "You're very good at this." By morning the details had faded to impressions, but something remained. A feeling that she'd discovered something important. Clara was released on a Tuesday morning. They returned her belongings, her phone, her wallet, her clothes. Her laptop was gone, replaced with a new one. They gave her a plane ticket to Austin and an employment packet for her new job. She arrived in Austin that afternoon. Her new apartment was furnished, her name already on the mailbox. Her employer, a tech firm she'd never heard of, welcomed her enthusiastically. Her new supervisor explained her role, analysing market trends, nothing classified, nothing complicated. For 2 weeks Clara lived normally. She worked, grocery shopped, watched television. Sometimes she'd catch herself staring at nothing, feeling like she'd forgotten something important, but the feeling always passed. Then, one evening, she received an email. The sender was listed as Federal Records Archive. The subject line, FOIA request reminder. She opened it. Your request for records regarding incident ENV071KD remains pending. Estimated processing time 6 to 8 months. You will be notified when documents are available. Clara stared at the email. ENV071KD. The code meant nothing to her. She didn't remember filing any FOIA request. She should delete it. Instead, she searched her deleted emails, found nothing. Searched her browser history, nothing. But the code stuck in her mind. ENV071KD. She opened a private browser window and typed it in. No results, just like before. Before when? Clara closed her laptop and went to bed, but she didn't sleep. 3 months later, a junior analyst at NOAA named David Park was processing routine satellite data when his system flagged an anomalous file. Department 7 event range.log. He clicked it. Inside were coordinates, timestamps and incident codes. One entry caught his attention. A predicted meteor sighting in rural Wyoming, scheduled for 3 days from now. David frowned. Predicted meteor sightings weren't part of NOAA's standard data. He checked the file's metadata. Created 3 months ago. Last modified yesterday. He tried to trace the file's origin, but the access logs instantly deleted themselves. David should have reported it to his supervisor. Should have followed proper protocol for unexplained data. Instead, he wrote down the coordinates. 3 days later, he took a personal day and drove to Wyoming. He arrived at the coordinates just after sunset and parked on a hilltop overlooking empty grassland. At 9:47 p.m, lights appeared in the sky. Vertical pillars, just like the file had predicted. At 10:15 p.m, 3 black SUVs arrived and parked in the field below. David grabbed his camera and started taking photos. One of the figures looked up toward his position. Even in darkness, David felt seen. The figure raised one hand and waved. Clara sat in her Austin apartment, unable to shake the feeling that she'd forgotten something crucial. She'd started keeping a journal, writing down fragments of dreams that felt like memories, codes, numbers. A man in a grey suit offering her a choice. None of it made sense. But she'd learned to trust patterns, even when she couldn't remember why. She opened her laptop and typed, Department 7. No results. She tried. ENV071KD, nothing, but her hands kept typing almost automatically. Department 7 _event _rains.log, and somewhere in a classified server farm in Virginia, an automated alert triggered. A file had been accessed. Not by Clara Rains. The credentials had been deactivated months ago, but the search query had been logged. Agent DiMauro received the notification on his secure phone. He read it, sighed, and opened a new case file. Subject: Rains Clara. Status: Recursive Awareness. Recommendation: Enhanced Reconciliation. He closed the file and made a call. "We have a problem," he said. "The Rains case isn't resolved." She's starting to remember. "How is that possible?" "I don't know, but we need to bring her back in." "What about the other one?" "Park?" "Same protocol. They're both exhibiting pattern recognition despite treatment. It's as if the signal is calling to them." "Then we need to find the source of the signal." Marrow looked out his office window at the Denver skyline. "We've been trying for 70 years. Whatever creates these events doesn't want to be found. It wants to be seen, and it chooses who sees it." He hung up and pulled up Clara's file again. Her photo stared back at him from the screen. Taken at age 9, standing in front of a suburban house, a Department 7 vehicle visible in the background. Even then she'd been watching. Some patterns couldn't be erased. Some people couldn't forget. And somewhere in the American night another set of lights appeared in the sky, calling to those who could see. Department 7 would respond. They always did. But the pattern would continue. It always did. Have you ever wondered why ancient monuments across the globe seem to align with mathematical precision? Why your GPS glitches in certain locations? Or why governments classify research about electromagnetic anomalies? Tonight's story might make you question every map you've ever trusted. Before we begin this journey into the hidden grid beneath our feet, I want to thank M10rapin for suggesting this topic. Your video ideas fuel these late-night tales, so please leave your suggestions in the comments below. And if you're ready to uncover the mysteries that keep you awake at night, make sure to like and subscribe to Sleep Theories. Now, dim your lights, settle in, and prepare to discover the truth about the lines that connect our world. My name is Alex Morrison, and I used to believe maps told the truth. As a GIS analyst, that's Geographic Information Systems for those who don't spend their days staring at satellite data and topographical overlays, I thought I understood how the world was organised. Cities here, mountains there, rivers cutting through valleys in predictable patterns carved by millions of years of erosion. Everything had a logical explanation. Everything could be mapped, measured and catalogued. That was before I found the pattern. It started innocently enough. Tuesday morning, October 15th, 8:47 a.m. I was hunched over my dual monitors in a cramped office in Brussels, working for Steinberg Construction Consortium. They'd hired me to evaluate potential sites for a new high-speed rail corridor that would connect Prague to Paris, part of the EU's Green Transportation Initiative. Routine work: overlay environmental data, check for protected sites, identify geological challenges. I'd done it 100 times before, but this time something was different. I was cross-referencing archaeological databases with our proposed route when I noticed it. A series of Neolithic monuments, stone circles, burial mounds, ancient wells, formed an almost perfect line across the landscape. Not just a few sites clustered together, but dozens of them, stretching for hundreds of miles. The proposed railway cut directly across this invisible corridor. At first, I laughed it off. Pattern recognition gone wild, I told myself. The human brain loves to find connections when none exist. But then I pulled up the magnetic anomaly data from the European Space Agency's swarm satellites. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. The magnetic variations followed the exact same line. Every single monument sat on a point of electromagnetic disturbance. The precision was impossible. We're talking about structures built 5,000 years apart by cultures that supposedly never interacted, aligned to within meters of a magnetic corridor that modern science had only just detected. I should have deleted the file, should have marked the route as approved and moved on with my life. Instead, I zoomed out. The line didn't stop at the edge of my survey area. It continued east through Romania, Turkey, Iran, west through England, across the Atlantic. I pulled up global archaeological databases, my fingers trembling as I plotted point after point. Stonehenge, Avebury, the Externstein, the Oracle at Delphi. Each site fell perfectly along extended trajectories of the same geometric pattern. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor. "Morrison, railway assessment due by noon. Stop whatever rabbit hole you're going down." But I couldn't stop. I'd found something that shouldn't exist. A planetary grid mapped by ancient peoples who supposedly thought the Earth was flat, following electromagnetic patterns we'd only discovered in the last century. Either I was losing my mind or I'd stumbled onto the greatest archaeological discovery of the millennium. I chose to believe the latter. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks later, I stood in a frost-covered field 40 kilometres outside Prague, watching my equipment fail in ways that defied every principle of engineering I knew. After discovering the alignment, I'd convinced Steinberg to let me conduct field surveys along the proposed route. Geological stability assessment, I'd called it. What I really wanted was to stand on one of these intersection points myself, to take readings that might explain how ancient peoples had detected magnetic anomalies without compasses or magnetometers. The morning had started normally enough. I'd parked my van on a dirt road near the village of Holubice, unloaded my survey equipment, and hiked 2 kilometres to the first monument site, a circle of weathered standing stones that locals called Devil's Dance. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and mist clung to the valleys like cotton wool. I set up my differential GPS unit first, waiting for it to lock onto satellites. The device chirped, showing full signal strength. Then, as I walked toward the centre of the stone circle, the screen flickered. Acquiring satellites. Signal lost. Acquiring satellites. I checked my phone. Same problem. The GPS app showed my location jumping wildly, placing me first in Prague, then Vienna, then somehow in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. My professional-grade survey unit, accurate to within centimetres under normal conditions, couldn't even determine which continent I was on. The electromagnetic field meter came next. The moment I switched it on, the needle slammed against the maximum reading and stayed there, quivering like it was fighting against invisible restraints. I'd seen similar readings near power lines or transformer stations, but we were in the middle of farmland. The nearest electrical infrastructure was kilometres away. You shouldn't be here. I spun around. An elderly woman stood at the edge of the field, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes the pale blue of winter sky. "I'm sorry," I called out in my broken Czech. She switched to accented English. "This place. It's not for outsiders, not for their machines." She gestured at my equipment with a gnarled finger. "I'm just conducting surveys for the railway," I explained, walking toward her, "making sure the ground is stable." She laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Stable? This line has been here since before the first stones were raised, before your railways, before your cities. Our ancestors knew to respect it, to build their monuments as, jak se říká, anchors, to keep the energy flowing properly." Energy? I pulled out my tablet, showing her the magnetic anomaly map. You mean this? You know about the electromagnetic patterns? Her eyes widened. For a moment she looked genuinely frightened. You've mapped it? The whole grid? She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You must stop. Some knowledge isn't meant to be documented. They will come for you if you continue. Who will come? But she was already walking away, moving faster than seemed possible for someone her age. The ones who already know, she called back. The ones who've always known. I wanted to follow her, to demand answers, but my drone chose that moment to fall out of the sky. No warning, no gradual descent. 1 second it was hovering steadily, the next it dropped like a stone, smashing into the frozen ground 20 metres away. As I ran to retrieve it, I noticed something through the trees, a structure that didn't belong. Hidden behind a thick stand of pines was a concrete building, brutalist in design, with narrow windows like suspicious eyes. Military architecture, Cold War era by the look of it. The smart thing would have been to leave immediately. Instead, I collected my broken drone and hiked toward the building. The structure was abandoned but not ancient. Rust streaked the metal door, which hung open on failing hinges. Inside, fluorescent lights dangled from exposed wiring, and the walls were covered in mould that formed patterns like continental drift. But it was the maps that stopped me cold. The entire north wall was covered in them. Topographical maps, geological surveys, electromagnetic readings, layers upon layers of data, some dating back to the 1960s. Red strings connected pins at various locations, creating a web that stretched across Europe. And running through it all, marked in thick black ink, was the same line I'd found. The same impossible alignment. In the corner, barely legible, someone had written, Earth Grid Project, classified, destroy after review. I pulled out my phone to photograph everything, but the camera wouldn't focus. Every image came out distorted, as if the very air in the room was bending light. I tried sketching what I saw instead, my hands shaking from more than cold. A metal filing cabinet in the corner had been forced open, its contents mostly removed or destroyed. But wedged behind the bottom drawer I found a single folder. Water damage had made most of it illegible, but I could make out fragments. Electromagnetic conductivity peaks at intersection points. Ancient structures appear to function as regulatory nodes. Catastrophic potential if grid destabilizes. Project terminated by Joint Commission directive. The last page was a photograph, grainy but unmistakable. It showed a massive antenna array in what looked like Alaska, the same distinctive design I'd seen in conspiracy documentaries about HAARP. But this photo was dated 1971, decades before HAARP officially existed. A sound outside made me freeze, the crunch of footsteps on frost. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. I shoved the folder inside my jacket and slipped out the back window, dropping into a thorny hedge that tore at my clothes. Through the trees, I could see dark vehicles pulling up to the building, men in unmarked uniforms spreading out to surround it. I ran, not toward my van, they'd certainly have someone watching it, but deeper into the forest, following a deer trail that wound toward the next village. Behind me I heard shouting in a language I didn't recognise. Not Czech, not German, something else. It took me 4 hours to circle back to my vehicle, approaching from the opposite direction through farmland. The van was untouched, but I knew they'd let me go. Let me run. They wanted to see what I'd do next, who I'd contact. As I drove away, hand steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, I realised the old woman had been right. Some knowledge wasn't meant to be documented, but it was too late now. I'd seen the grid, seen evidence that governments knew about it, had studied it, had classified it, and I was going to find out why. My apartment in Brussels became a command centre for obsession. After the encounter at Holubici, I'd returned to work, filed a bland report recommending further geological assessment, and pretended everything was normal. But every evening, I locked my door, pulled the blinds and dove deeper into the mystery. The coffee table disappeared under printed maps. The walls became a spider web of string and pins connecting sites across continents. I'd stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night, surviving on espresso and the electric thrill of discovery. The pattern was everywhere once you knew how to look. Start with the obvious ones, the monuments everyone knows, the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Easter Island. Plot them on a globe, not a flat map, and they formed geometric relationships so precise they could have been placed by satellite guidance. The Great Pyramid sits at the exact centre of Earth's landmass. Easter Island is antipodal to the Indus Valley civilization sites. Angkor Wat, the Nazca Lines, and Easter Island form a perfect Great Circle route, but those were just the famous nodes. The real revelation came when I started plotting lesser-known sites. Every major ancient city sat on the grid. Babylon, Persepolis, Constantinople, Carthage, all built at intersection points where multiple energy lines converged. The Romans, master engineers, had built their road system following these same invisible highways. The Silk Road traced a major east-west corridor. Even modern cities clustered around the same points: New York, London, Tokyo, Cairo. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. I pulled declassified documents from every database I could access. The US Freedom of Information Act, the UK National Archives, leaked Soviet files from the fall of the USSR. Most of it was useless. Budget reports, personnel transfers, bureaucratic minutiae. But buried in the noise were fragments of something bigger. Project Stargate, the CIA's remote viewing program, included maps marking psychic hotspots that matched my grid lines perfectly. Operation Paperclip scientists had studied Earth radiation patterns in the 1950s. The Soviets had run something called Program Sputnik Grid that involved placing sensors at ancient monument sites across their territory. The most intriguing find came from a 1962 Canadian military report about the construction of the DEW line, the distant early warning radar system across the Arctic. An engineer named Captain Lawrence Brennan had noted persistent electromagnetic anomalies at certain locations that required special shielding for equipment. His proposed sites for radar stations, plotted on my grid, formed a perfect arc along a major ley line. But the document that changed everything was a leaked memo from 1997, source unknown, that had circulated on conspiracy forums before being scrubbed from most of the internet. I found it cached on an obscure Russian server. 2. Joint Chiefs Special Projects Division Aura. Earth grid stability concerns. Recent seismic activity correlates with disruption of natural electromagnetic corridors via urban development and mineral extraction. Recommendation: establish monitoring stations at key intersection points under cover of telecommunications infrastructure. See attached list of priority sites. The attached list was gone, but the implication was clear. They knew. The military, the intelligence agencies, the energy companies, they all knew about the grid, and they were using it. I started mapping modern installations against the ley lines. The correlation was undeniable. HARP in Alaska, ISCAT in Norway, Sura in Russia, Arecibo in Puerto Rico. Every major ionospheric research facility sat directly on an intersection point. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN traced a circle around one of the most powerful convergent zones in Europe. Nuclear power plants clustered along the lines. Major military bases were built at intersection points. Even the routes of underground fibre-optic cables followed the ancient paths, as if modern engineers were unconsciously drawn to the same energy corridors their ancestors had marked with standing stones. My phone rang at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number. Stop digging. The voice was electronically distorted, genderless. Who is this? Someone trying to help you. You found the grid. Congratulations. Now forget about it before you end up like the others. What others? Bruce Cathy, John Michel, Ivan Sanderson, all the researchers who got too close to the truth. Heart attacks, car accidents, sudden illnesses. Very convenient. My blood chilled. I knew those names. Independent researchers from the 60s and 70s who'd written about Earth energy grids, all died relatively young under questionable circumstances. Why are you warning me? Because the grid is destabilizing. The ancients built monuments as regulators, keeping the energy in balance. Modern construction is disrupting the flow. Mumbai, 2006. Haiti, 2010. Fukushima, 2011. Those weren't random natural disasters. They were pressure releases along fractured ley lines. That's impossible. Electromagnetic fields don't cause earthquakes. The voice laughed, bitter and electronic. The electromagnetic fields are just what we can measure. The grid is deeper than that. It's the planet's nervous system, its circulation, and we're giving it a stroke, one skyscraper at a time. Then we need to warn people. With what evidence? Mystical energy lines, ancient wisdom. You'll be dismissed as a crackpot. Unless ... The voice paused. Unless you can prove the energy is real, measurable, usable. How? Return to the grid, not with standard equipment. That's designed to filter out the frequencies you need to detect. Build your own sensor. Copper coils, crystal oscillators, very specific specifications. I'm sending you the plans now. My laptop pinged with an encrypted file. One more thing, the voice said. When you record the surge, you'll have about 6 hours before they track the signature back to you. Use that time wisely. The line went dead. I opened the file. The schematic looked like something Tesla might have designed after a fever dream. Multiple copper coils in a complex geometric arrangement, connected to crystal oscillators and frequency analyzers. The materials list was surprisingly mundane, everything available from electronic suppliers. It took me 3 days to build it, working in secret in a rented storage unit outside the city. The device looked like abstract art more than scientific equipment, all gleaming copper spirals and crystal matrices. But when I powered it on, every LED lit up green. It was detecting something. Now I just had to be crazy enough to test it. The academic forum was my first mistake. Well, second, if you count building the sensor, but hubris makes fools of us all, and I needed someone, anyone, to verify I wasn't losing my mind. Geoanomalies.net was a small community, mostly graduate students and professional geologists sharing unusual findings. I created a throwaway account and posted a conservative summary. Electromagnetic anomalies correlating with ancient monument placement, seeking peer review. I attached 3 images, my overlay map of European sites, a graph showing magnetic field fluctuations, and 1 photo from the abandoned military outpost with the classified stamps carefully cropped out. Within an hour, I had 2 responses. A geology professor from Munich confirmed similar observations near Bronze Age sites. A student from Oxford posted links to academic papers about telluric currents, natural electrical currents that flow through the Earth's crust. Then, 90 minutes after posting, my thread vanished. Not deleted with a removed by moderator message. Gone, like it had never existed. The cached version on Google disappeared. The other users who'd responded found their comments erased from their own post histories. My laptop screen flickered. A chat window opened without my input. Admin. Your recent activity has been flagged for review. Me. What activity? Who is this? Admin. Consider this a courtesy warning. Cease your current research immediately. Me. Or what? Admin. Or we stop being courteous. The chat window closed itself. When I tried to screenshot the conversation, my laptop blue-screened. It took 20 minutes to restart, and when it did, my hard drive had been wiped. Not formatted, wiped. Every sector overwritten with random data multiple times. A technique that made recovery impossible. Thank God for cloud backups, I thought. Logging into my secure server. Empty. 3 years of research. Gone. Even my email accounts had been purged. I still had physical copies of the most important findings, hidden in a safety deposit box across town. But the message was clear. They could reach me anywhere, any time. The next morning I arrived at work to find my keycard deactivated. Security escorted me to a conference room where my supervisor, Mr. Steinberg himself, sat with 2 people I'd never seen before. A woman in a severe black suit and a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite, both with a kind of posture that screamed military. Alex, Steinberg began, sweating despite the air conditioning. These representatives from the European Infrastructure Security Division have some concerns about your recent surveys. I'd never heard of the European Infrastructure Security Division. I doubted it existed on any official registry. The woman smiled without warmth. Mr. Morrison, your work on the railway project has been exemplary. However, we've noticed some unusual patterns in your research that fall outside the project's scope. I'm thorough, I said. I investigate all factors that might affect construction, including archaeological sites hundreds of kilometres from the proposed route. The man's accent was impossible to place, including electromagnetic phenomena that have no bearing on rail safety. I believe they do have bearing. What you believe is irrelevant. The woman pulled out a tablet showing my deleted forum post. Discussing classified military research on public forums is a serious offence. Classified? I found those maps in an abandoned... Mr. Morrison... Her voice could have frozen helium. You're being terminated from this project, effective immediately. Your severance package is generous, contingent on signing this NDA. She slid a document across the table. You'll cease all research related to electromagnetic anomalies, ancient monuments, or what you call ley lines. Any violation will result in prosecution under the European Security Act. I looked at Steinberg. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And if I refuse? The man leaned forward. Your visa expires in 6 weeks. Your bank accounts are already frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. Your academic credentials are under review. Would you like me to continue? The threat was clear. Sign and walk away with something or lose everything and possibly face imprisonment. I signed. They confiscated my company laptop, my access badges, even my parking pass. The woman handed me a business card with no name, just a phone number. If you remember any details you'd like to share about your research, call this number. We reward cooperation. I was escorted out of the building like a criminal, my colleagues staring as security watched me pack my desk. The personal items fit in a single cardboard box, a coffee mug, some photos, a stress ball shaped like Earth. They even checked those before letting me leave. On the tram ride home, I noticed the man 3 seats back. Grey coat, newspaper held too high, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. When I got off 2 stops early, he followed. When I ducked into a cafe, he positioned himself across the street. They were watching me. Fine, let them watch. That night I made a decision. If they wanted to threaten me, surveil me, erase my work, they'd already shown their hand. Whatever was hidden in the Earth's electromagnetic grid was important enough to destroy careers over, which meant it was important enough to risk everything to expose. I had one advantage. The sensor I'd built was hidden in the storage unit, registered under a false name paid in cash. They didn't know about it yet. The anonymous contact had said I'd have 6 hours after recording the surge before they tracked it. 6 hours to gather proof and upload it somewhere they couldn't reach. I started planning. The winter solstice seemed appropriate. December 21st, the longest night of the year, when ancient monuments worldwide align with celestial events. If the Earth's energy grid responded to cosmic cycles, this would be the night to prove it. I chose a site carefully, the intersection of 3 major ley lines near Carnac in Brittany, France. The famous stone rows there were just the visible part of a massive Neolithic complex, most of it on private land away from tourist routes. I'd identified a specific confluence point in a forest grove, marked by a small standing stone unknown to archaeology. The 2-week preparation was meticulous. I withdrew cash gradually, never more than €200 at a time, bought a used van with fake registration, gathered camping equipment, emergency supplies, and most importantly a satellite internet transmitter that could upload directly to multiple servers simultaneously. They were still watching me in Brussels, but their surveillance had grown lazy. Same operative, same patterns. On December 19th, I led him on a boring tour of grocery stores and laundromats, then slipped out the back of a cinema showing a 3-hour film. By the time he realised I was gone, I was already crossing into France on secondary roads. The grove near Carnac was exactly as satellite images had shown, a circle of ancient oaks surrounding a moss-covered menhir about 2 metres tall. The stone was carved with spiral patterns worn nearly smooth by millennia of weather. When I placed my hand on it, I felt a subtle vibration, like standing near a massive subwoofer playing below human hearing. I set up the sensor array according to the anonymous blueprints. Copper coils arranged in a complex mandala, crystal oscillators at specific angles, the whole apparatus connected to recording equipment and the satellite uplink. If this worked, data would stream to servers in 12 countries simultaneously. As sunset approached, my conventional instrument started showing anomalies. The magnetometer detected fluctuations in a rhythmic pattern, almost like a heartbeat. The frequency analyzer picked up ultra-low sounds below 7 Hz, the range that some researchers claim can induce altered states of consciousness. Then the sun touched the horizon, and everything changed. The copper coils began resonating, producing a tone that I felt more than heard. The crystals started glowing with a faint blue luminescence, not reflected light, but actual emission. The recording equipment went haywire, needles dancing across their maximum ranges. At the moment of sunset, 5:47 p.m. local time, the surge hit. The ground beneath me vibrated like a struck bell. The standing stone lit up with phosphorescent patterns, spirals of light racing across its surface following the ancient carvings. The air itself seemed to thicken, taking on a golden quality that made everything appear to be underwater. My body felt weightless, not floating, but as if gravity had simply forgotten about me. I watched my hand rise without conscious thought, fingers spreading to touch the charged air. Electricity danced between my fingertips, not painful, but ecstatic, like every nerve was firing with pure information. The sensor array was screaming data into the satellite feed, electromagnetic readings off the scale, gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist, temperature fluctuations that defied thermodynamics, all of it streaming live to servers worldwide, impossible to suppress or delete simultaneously. Through the golden haze I saw them, spheres of light moving through the forest. Not aircraft, not drones, perfect orbs of luminescence following the ley line like trains on invisible tracks. They moved silently, purposefully, some the size of basketballs, others as large as cars. One passed directly over me, and for a moment I felt connected to something vast, a network of energy that wrapped the planet like neural pathways. The revelation hit me all at once. The ley lines weren't just electromagnetic corridors, they were conscious. Not alive exactly, but aware. The Earth itself was a single vast organism, and these lines were its sensory network, its method of experiencing and responding to everything on its surface. The ancient builders hadn't just discovered the grid, they'd communicated with it. Their monuments were interface points, allowing human consciousness to merge temporarily with planetary awareness. That's why sacred sites induced religious experiences. That's why people felt transformed at these locations. And now, modern civilization was damaging this network. Every skyscraper driven deep into the earth, every mine boring through the corridors, every electromagnetic broadcast interfering with the natural frequencies, we were giving the planet the equivalent of nerve damage. The surge peaked at 6:13 p.m, lasting exactly 26 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The lights vanished. The stone went dark. My equipment powered down simultaneously, despite having hours of battery remaining. In the sudden silence, I heard vehicles approaching. Many vehicles. I grabbed the memory cards from the recording equipment and ran. Behind me, floodlights blazed to life, turning the grove into harsh daylight. Voices shouted in multiple languages. A helicopter thundered overhead, its searchlights sweeping through the trees. But I'd prepared for this. My real van was hidden 2 kilometers away. The one by the grove was a decoy, purchased for this specific purpose. While they surrounded it, I was already driving down back roads toward a safe house I'd arranged weeks earlier. The data had uploaded successfully, 87 gigabytes of impossible readings that proved the Earth's energy grid was real, measurable, and more powerful than anyone imagined. Within hours, it would be mirrored on servers worldwide, impossible to suppress completely. But as I drove through the darkness, one thought haunted me. If the grid was conscious, if the Earth itself was aware, what did it think of what we were doing to it? And more terrifyingly, how long before it decided to stop tolerating us? The safe house was a converted barn in the Pyrenees, owned by a conspiracy theorist named Marcus, who'd contacted me through encrypted channels after my data went live. He believed the government was controlling weather through chemtrails, which was absurd, but he also had solar panels, satellite internet, and absolutely no trust in authority. Exactly what I needed. For 3 days, I watched my findings ripple across the internet. Alternative news sites ran with headlines like, "Proof Earth's secret energy grid exposed." Scientists on Twitter debated the data's authenticity. Skeptics called it an elaborate hoax, but enough people with credentials were taking it seriously that mainstream media couldn't ignore it entirely. Then Marcus knocked on my door at dawn on the 4th day. "You have a visitor, says you're expecting him." I wasn't expecting anyone. The man standing in Marcus's kitchen looked like a university professor from the 1970s. Corduroy jacket with elbow patches, wild grey hair, thick glasses repaired with tape. He was drinking tea from a chipped mug and studying my printed data with intense focus. "Mr. Morrison," he said without looking up, "my name is Professor Emanuel Richter. I'm the one who sent you the sensor blueprints." The anonymous contact. I studied him carefully. "How did you find me?" "The same way they'll find you eventually, the satellite uplink signature. But I know how to mask my movements. 30 years of practice." He finally looked at me, his eyes sharp behind the thick lenses. "Your data is magnificent, but you're missing the larger picture." "Enlighten me!" He pulled out a battered laptop and opened a file filled with equations I couldn't begin to understand. "The ley lines aren't just electromagnetic. That's merely the aspect we can measure with current technology. They're multi-dimensional conduits, channels through space-time itself. That's impossible. So is your gravitational anomaly data, yet there it is." He pulled up a world map covered in glowing lines. Every ancient culture had different names for it. Chi in China, Prana in India, Pneuma in Greece. They were all describing the same phenomenon, a fundamental force that mainstream physics hasn't acknowledged. Why hasn't physics acknowledged it? Richter laughed bitterly. Because those who discover it either join the suppression or disappear. I was part of the suppression for 20 years. He told me his story. In 1973, fresh from MIT with a PhD in theoretical physics, he'd been recruited by a Defense Department think tank. His job, investigate anomalous energy readings at ancient sites worldwide. Within 2 years, his team had mapped the basic structure of the Earth grid and realised its potential. Unlimited clean energy, he said. Instantaneous communication across any distance. Even manipulation of localised space-time. The military applications were obvious, but so were the benefits for humanity. We could have transformed civilization. What happened? We succeeded. His face darkened. The first experimental tap into a ley line intersection was in Nevada, 1978. We pulled enough energy in 30 seconds to power Las Vegas for a year. Then the intersection point destabilized. He showed me a classified photo, a perfectly circular crater 300 meters across, the sand turned to glass. The official record lists it as an underground nuclear test, but no bomb did that. We'd ruptured something fundamental in the grid structure. The project was immediately classified beyond top secret. Research continued, but focused on weaponization rather than energy production. HAARP, Richter explained, wasn't about weather modification or mind control. Those were cover stories. It was about learning to manipulate the grid without destabilizing it. But they're failing, he continued. Every year more intersection points become unstable. The Haiti earthquake, the Japanese tsunami, the increase in volcanic activity, they're all symptoms of grid breakdown. Caused by what? Everything. Mining operations cutting through ley lines, fracking disrupting deep conduits, cities spreading concrete over intersection points. But the worst damage comes from electromagnetic pollution, cellular towers, Wi-Fi, satellite transmissions. We're drowning out the Earth's natural frequency. He pulled up another image, a graph showing electromagnetic background radiation over time. It had increased 10,000-fold since 1900. The ancients understood balance, Richter said. Their monuments weren't just markers, they were regulators. Stone circles amplified and stabilized the energy. Pyramids acted as capacitors, storing excess power. Temple complexes provided controlled release points. It was a planetary management system maintained for thousands of years. Until we forgot, until we were made to forget. His expression hardened. The knowledge was deliberately suppressed, first by religions that wanted monopolies on spiritual experience, then by governments that wanted monopolies on power, now by corporations that profit from scarcity. A car engine growled outside. Marcus appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand. 3 black SUVs coming up the mountain road. Richter stood calmly. They tracked me, not you. I've been sloppy, getting old, I suppose. He handed me a flash drive. Everything I couldn't publish, 40 years of research, the complete grid map, the frequency specifications, the names of everyone involved in the cover-up. Come with me, I said. We can both run. I'm 73 years old, Mr. Morrison. I've been running since 1991. He smiled sadly. But information wants to be free. Upload that data everywhere. Send it to journalists, scientists, anyone who'll listen. Make it impossible to suppress. The vehicles were getting closer. Marcus was already at his truck, engine running. Richter walked to the door, then turned back. One more thing. The grid isn't just breaking down, it's evolving. The electromagnetic pollution we're producing is forcing it to adapt, to develop new pathways. The lights you saw at Karnak, they're increasing worldwide. The grid is trying to heal itself, but if we don't stop interfering, he shook his head, the Earth will protect itself, even if that means eliminating the infection. We're the infection? From the planet's perspective? Yes. He walked out to meet the SUVs. I ran to Marcus's truck and we tore down the back road as fast as the ancient vehicle could manage. In the mirrors, I saw men in tactical gear surrounding the farmhouse. Richter stood in the doorway, hands raised, dignity intact, even in surrender. We drove for 6 hours, changing vehicles twice, before I felt safe enough to stop. In a roadside motel that still used actual keys, I opened Richter's flash drive. The data was staggering. Detailed maps of every ley line intersection on Earth. Energy readings from 6 decades of secret monitoring. Photos of ancient sites I'd never heard of, all showing the same telltale signs of grid integration. And a list of names. Politicians, CEOs, military leaders, all aware of the grid's existence, all complicit in hiding it. But most importantly, there were the repair protocols. Richter's team had developed methods to stabilise damaged intersection points, to restore the grid's natural balance, the knowledge to undo decades of damage, the blueprints for saving the planet's nervous system. The cafe in Prague is busy enough that I blend in, anonymous among the tourists and students. My laptop is connected through 7 proxy servers, my identity masked by layers of encryption that would make the NSA proud. The barista brings my 3rd espresso of the morning, and I nod my thanks without looking up from the screen. The world has changed since Karnak. Not visibly. The same traffic jams clog the streets, the same politicians make the same promises, the same corporations chase the same profits. But underneath, in the invisible currents that connect all things, something fundamental has shifted. Richter's data didn't just expose the conspiracy, it provided a roadmap for resistance. The first wave of releases came through WikiLeaks, the Panama Papers network, and a dozen smaller journalism outlets simultaneously. By the time the suppression teams realised the scope of the leak, copies were already spreading across the dark web faster than they could be eliminated. The names, the cover-up, the military applications, all of it laid bare for anyone willing to look. The mainstream media tried to ignore it at first, then dismissed it as fringe pseudoscience. But when MIT physicists began replicating the sensor readings, when archaeological teams started confirming the monument alignments, when seismologists noticed the correlation between grid disruption and earthquake patterns, denial became impossible. The second wave was more practical. Anonymous networks of researchers, hackers and activists began building Richter's stabilization devices. The components were surprisingly accessible. Copper coils, quartz crystals, simple electronics. Within months, guerrilla grid repair operations were springing up worldwide. They called themselves the Earth Guardians, though the media branded them eco-terrorists after the first infrastructure disruption. A cellular tower in California went offline for 3 days when activists installed a resonance dampener at its base. A fracking operation in Pennsylvania was forced to shut down when mysterious equipment failures plagued their site. The authorities couldn't understand how protesters were disabling billion-dollar installations with what looked like art projects. They still don't understand that they're not fighting the technology, they're working with it. The grid wants to heal itself, we're just helping it remember how. The third wave is happening now, and it's the most dangerous one yet, because the Earth is starting to respond. I click through the news feeds on my encrypted browser. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake in Nevada, precisely centred on a classified military facility. The official story blames shifting tectonic plates, but satellite images show the epicenter as a perfect circle exactly 300 metres across, the same dimensions as Richter's 1978 crater. The Earth is healing that old wound, and anything built on top of it is simply relocated. Similar natural disasters are occurring worldwide. A mysterious sinkhole swallowed a Chinese mining operation that was drilling through a major ley line. The Large Hadron Collider experienced a catastrophic failure that physicists can't explain. Every component simply stopped working simultaneously, as if the Earth itself had withdrawn permission for the experiment. The most telling incidents are the recoveries. Ancient sites that had been disrupted by modern construction are spontaneously healing. The stones of Avebury, displaced by roads and buildings, have begun generating electromagnetic fields so powerful that nearby electronic equipment fails. The original Nazca lines in Peru are glowing again, visible from space without infrared enhancement. Reports of luminous phenomena are increasing exponentially. The same spheres of light I witnessed at Karnak are now appearing at intersection points across the globe. The scientific community calls them ball lightning or atmospheric plasma events, but those of us who know the truth understand what we're seeing. The Earth's immune system activating, my encrypted messenger pings, a new report from our monitoring station in Scotland. Roslyn Chapel energy spike recorded at 14:47 GMT. Visual confirmation of grid activation. Stone began resonating at 7.83 Hz for approximately 30 minutes. Local electronics disrupted in 2-kilometre radius. Phenomenon spreading along ley line toward Edinburgh. Estimate arrival in 6 hours. 7.83 Hz. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural frequency. The planet is remembering how to sing. I close the laptop and step outside. Prague sprawls before me, a modern city built atop ancient foundations, and I can feel the tension beneath its streets. 3 major ley lines converge under Wenceslas Square, their intersection buried under centuries of construction. The grid flows around the obstruction now, like water around a stone, but the pressure is building. Soon, the Earth will decide whether to accommodate our cities or reclaim its sacred geometry. And honestly, after seeing what we've done to the planet's nervous system, I'm not sure I'd blame it for choosing reclamation. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. Café Louvre, corner table, 5 minutes. I almost ignore it. Anonymous contacts have led to both salvation and near capture over the past 6 months. But something about the message feels different, urgent without being threatening. The Café Louvre is just around the corner, a historic establishment that once hosted Einstein and Kafka. I find the corner table occupied by a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed but with the weathered hands of someone who works outdoors. Her eyes are the pale blue of winter sky. It takes me a moment to recognise her without the wool shawl. The old woman from Holubis, the one who warned me to stop digging. She looks younger somehow, more vibrant, as if the past months have restored something vital that had been missing. "Sit," she says in accented English. "We have much to discuss and little time." I remain standing. "Who are you?" "My name is Dr. Vera Novakova." I was Professor Richter's research partner from 1975 to 1991. When the project went dark, I returned to Prague and spent 30 years watching the grid deteriorate, watching the old ways die. She gestures to the empty chair. "Please, the Earth Guardians need guidance from someone who understands the ancient protocols." Slowly I sit. "You've been monitoring us?" "Protecting you. The network Marcus connected you to. Half of those encrypted channels run through servers I maintain. The financial accounts that kept you hidden, funded by a trust I established decades ago. Did you think your escape from Karnak was purely your own skill? The revelation hits like cold water. You've been manipulating everything. Facilitating. There's a difference. She pulls out a tablet showing a world map covered in pulsing nodes of light. The grid is awakening faster than we anticipated. Your data release accelerated the process. What should have taken decades is happening in months. That's good, isn't it? The Earth healing itself. Her expression darkens. Healing, yes, but healing can be traumatic. When a broken bone resets itself, the process is violent. The grid is preparing to realign the planet's energy flows, and everything built in opposition to those flows will be swept aside. She zooms in on major cities, each one sitting atop intersection points like tumours on nerve endings. New York, London, Tokyo, they're all going to be tested. The grid will offer them a choice, adapt or be removed. Most will choose to fight rather than change. So we warn them, show them the repair protocols. Do you really think the forces that suppressed this knowledge for 70 years will suddenly embrace it? That governments and corporations will voluntarily dismantle the systems that gave them power? She shakes her head. They'll try to weaponize the awakening instead, turn the Earth's own defense mechanisms against their enemies. The chill runs through me as I understand the implications. They'll try to control the grid. They're already trying. HARP has been broadcasting disruption frequencies for weeks. The Chinese are using their rare Earth mining operations to physically sever ley lines. The Russians are detonating nuclear devices at intersection points, trying to create artificial nodes they can control. The tablet shows the results. Chaotic feedback loops spreading across the planet's energy network like infection. Every intervention makes the situation worse. They're not just damaging individual lines anymore, they're destabilizing the entire system. What happens if the grid fails completely? Dr. Novakova closes the tablet. According to our models, the planet's magnetic field becomes erratic, weather patterns collapse, tectonic stability fails, the biosphere begins to shut down. She meets my eyes. Extinction event. Not just for humans, for everything. The weight of it settles over me like a shroud. We're not just fighting for disclosure anymore, or even for environmental protection. We're fighting for the continuation of life on Earth. So what do we do? She slides a memory chip across the table. The complete archive. Every site, every frequency, every ancient protocol we've recovered. But also something new. Integration codes. Integration codes? The monuments were just the beginning. The ancients didn't just build regulatory structures, they created organic interfaces. Humans who could merge temporarily with the grid consciousness, becoming living nodes in the network. The genetic markers still exist in certain bloodlines. My hand freezes halfway to the memory chip. You're talking about human sacrifice. Not sacrifice. Symbiosis. Her voice carries a strange resonance as if speaking from great depth. The planet needs conscious partners, not just passive regulators. People willing to become part of the grid itself to help guide the awakening. And you think I'm one of these bloodlines? I know you are. The way you responded to the energy at Karnak, the ease with which you detected the grid patterns, these aren't learned skills, Mr. Morrison. They're genetic memories. She stands, leaving the chip on the table. The network is ready to make you an offer. Full integration. Consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness. Partnership in planetary stewardship. In exchange for what? Your human life. Your individual existence. You would become something larger, but you would cease to be Alex Morrison. The cafe continues around us, conversations in Czech and English. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of cups on saucers. Normal life proceeding as if we weren't discussing the potential end of human civilization. How long do I have to decide? The awakening reaches critical phase at the next solar maximum, 18 months. After that, the grid will make its own decisions about humanity's future, with or without conscious human partners. She walks away, pausing at the door. The old woman who warned you at Holubis. She made the integration choice in 1968, during the Prague Spring. The Soviets thought they were suppressing political uprising, but they were really trying to prevent grid awakening. She's been guiding the network ever since, preserving the knowledge until the right time. And you? Dr. Novakova smiles, and for a moment her eyes glow with the same blue light I'd seen in the copper coils. I made my choice years ago. Everything I've done since has been the grid working through me, including finding you. She steps into the Prague afternoon and vanishes into the crowd. I sit alone with the memory chip, feeling the weight of impossible decision. Save the planet by joining it. Preserve humanity by transcending it. Outside, storm clouds are gathering despite the morning's clear forecast. Through the cafe window I can see electrical discharges dancing between the cloud layers. Not lightning, but something more purposeful. The grid flexing its muscles, testing its strength. My laptop chimes with incoming messages from Earth Guardian cells worldwide. Similar phenomena are being reported from every continent. The awakening is accelerating. I slip the memory chip into my pocket and pay for my coffee. Whatever choice I make, it won't be here in this cafe, surrounded by the comfortable illusions of normal life. It will be at an intersection point, where the planet's consciousness runs closest to the surface, where human and Earth awareness can touch. The old town square of Prague is a 15-minute walk, built over one of the most powerful convergence points in Europe. As I step into the street, I can already feel it calling, a deep thrumming beneath the cobblestones, a magnetic pull that bypasses rational thought and speaks directly to something ancestral in my cells. Time to find out what I really am and what I might become. This message was uploaded simultaneously to 12,847 servers worldwide at 11:47 GMT on March 21st, the spring equinox. Source analysis indicates the transmission originated from Prague, Czech Republic, but routing through quantum encrypted channels makes precise location impossible. To anyone receiving this, my name was Alex Morrison, and this is my final report. I'm writing this from the Old Town Square in Prague, sitting on the steps of the astronomical clock. It's just past midnight, and the square is empty except for me and the growing sphere of blue light that hovers above the central flagstones. The light is beautiful. Not harsh like electric illumination, but soft and deep, like looking into the heart of a star. I can feel it calling to me. The memory chip Dr. Novakova gave me contained everything she promised, and more. The complete archive of human grid interactions spanning 5,000 years, bloodline genealogies tracing back to the monument builders, and the integration protocols, step-by-step instructions for conscious merger with planetary consciousness. I've spent the past 3 hours uploading everything to dead drops and secure servers across the globe. By the time anyone reads this, the information will be replicated beyond any possibility of suppression. The grid won't die with me, but more importantly, I've realised that choice was an illusion. The integration isn't something I can accept or refuse. It's already happening. Has been happening since that first moment in Holubics, when my equipment failed and I felt something vast and patient taking notice of me. Every breakthrough, every narrow escape, every perfectly timed contact, none of it was luck or skill. The grid has been slowly incorporating me into itself, preparing me for this moment. The Alex Morrison who started this journey no longer exists. What remains is something between human and other, a bridge between two forms of consciousness. The sphere is descending now, close enough that I can see patterns moving within its light, mathematical forms that hurt to look at directly, that speak to parts of my brain that shouldn't exist. I understand now why the ancients built their monuments with such precision. They weren't following blueprints, they were translating visions like this one into stone and earth. Around the world, others are receiving similar calls. The bloodlines are awakening. Not many, perhaps a few thousand individuals scattered across the planet, but enough. Enough to serve as living nodes in the network, enough to help guide the transformation. Because that's what this is. Not an ending, but a metamorphosis. The environmental crisis, the grid breakdown, the increasing natural disasters, they're birth pangs. The Earth is evolving into something new, something that can consciously participate in cosmic processes instead of simply enduring them. But evolution requires cooperation, and cooperation requires communication. That's where we come in. The bridges, the translators. I can feel my individual thoughts beginning to merge with something infinitely larger. Not lost, expanded. Like a drop of water finally understanding that it was always part of the ocean. The fear is gone now, replaced by wonder at the sheer scope of what I'm becoming part of. The sphere touches my forehead, and suddenly I can perceive the entire planet as a single living system. Every heartbeat, every breath, every growing plant and moving animal connected by streams of light that pulse in perfect rhythm. The ley lines aren't empty channels. They're full of consciousness, carrying the thoughts and dreams and experiences of everything that has ever lived on Earth. And beyond Earth, other networks stretch across the galaxy. Planetary minds in conversation across impossible distances, sharing the wisdom gained from billions of years of conscious evolution. We're not alone. We never were. We just weren't developed enough to hear the conversation. Until now, the transformation is accelerating. I can feel other nodes coming online. In the Amazon rainforest, where an indigenous shaman stepped into a similar sphere of light. At Uluru, where an Aboriginal elder touched the songlines and felt them sing back. At Glastonbury Tor, where a British physicist finally understood why his equations had been leading him there. We are becoming the Earth's nervous system, its immune system, its consciousness. The governments and corporations will try to fight this change, of course. They'll use their weapons and their machines and their desperate attempts to control forces they can't comprehend. But they're fighting the planet itself now, and planets are patient in ways that human institutions cannot imagine. Some cities will fall, some systems will collapse, but from the wreckage something better will grow. A civilization in harmony with its living world instead of at war with it. The survivors will learn to listen to the Earth's voice, to build with the grid instead of against it, to see themselves as part of a larger organism instead of its masters. It won't be easy, evolution never is, but it will be beautiful. The light is surrounding me completely now. I can barely remember being separate from it. Soon this human form will dissolve, and what was Alex Morrison will become part of something vast and interconnected and eternal. But first, one final message for anyone who finds this record. The grid is not our enemy. It never was. It's our mother, our teacher, our future. Those of you who can feel its call, don't resist. Step into the light. Become part of the solution. Those who can't or won't, please step aside. The Earth is healing itself, and it will not be stopped by fear or greed, or the desperate clinging to systems that no longer serve. The age of separation is ending. The age of integration has begun. Welcome to the awakening. The glow of 17 monitors bathed Elias Corrin's face in an ethereal blue light as his fingers danced across 3 keyboards simultaneously. In the depths of his converted basement apartment, time moved differently. Days blurred into nights, and nights stretched endlessly as he navigated the labyrinthine pathways of the dark web like a digital archaeologist, uncovering humanity's buried secrets. At 32, Elias had already earned and lost 2 fortunes through his hacking prowess. First fortune came easily. A teenage prodigy exploiting security vulnerabilities for corporate clients who paid millions to keep their weaknesses secret. He'd lived like a digital king, penthouses overlooking Silicon Valley, exotic cars that remained untouched in climate-controlled garages, while he preferred the glow of his monitors to sunlight. That first fortune vanished when he exposed Meridian Pharmaceuticals' cover-up of deadly side effects in their breakthrough arthritis medication. The leaked documents showed they'd known their drug caused cardiac episodes in 12% of patients over 60, but had buried the studies to protect their $10 billion investment. Elias had expected whistleblower protection. Instead, he found himself blacklisted from every major tech company, his reputation destroyed by a coordinated character assassination campaign that painted him as an unstable idealist who couldn't be trusted with sensitive information. The second fortune came from smaller clients, criminal organisations, corporate espionage rings, government contractors who needed deniability. The work paid well but corroded his soul, each job pulling him deeper into the shadows of the digital underworld. That money disappeared into legal fees after a wrongful arrest for hacking the Federal Reserve, a crime he hadn't committed but couldn't prove he hadn't, given his reputation and the circumstantial evidence that seemed perfectly crafted to implicate him. 2 years in minimum security prison had shown him the true cost of challenging powerful systems. The other inmates respected his technical skills, but the guards treated him like a dangerous terrorist. Solitary confinement stretched for months whenever he complained about conditions or tried to organise better treatment for his fellow prisoners. By the time he was released on a technicality, evidence had mysteriously gone missing. He'd learned that the system didn't just punish dissent, it transformed dissidents into cautionary tales. Now, money meant nothing to him, only truth mattered. His obsession with secret societies began innocently enough, a childhood fascination sparked by his grandfather's stories about World War II intelligence operations. The old man had worked as a codebreaker for the OSS, predecessor to the CIA, and had filled young Elias's imagination with tales of hidden messages and shadow wars. After his grandfather's death when Elias was 12, he'd found boxes of declassified documents in the attic, revealing just how much of recent history had been shaped by invisible hands. That childhood fascination evolved into a methodical hunt for evidence as he grew older and acquired the technical skills to dig deeper than amateur conspiracy theorists ever could. While other hackers chased Bitcoin fortunes and corporate espionage contracts, Elias pursued shadows and whispers, digital phantoms that most people dismissed as paranoid delusions. He'd spent years infiltrating closed forums where former intelligence operatives shared war stories, decrypting abandoned hard drives from defunct government contractors, and following digital breadcrumbs through the dark web's most obscure corners. His apartment had become a digital monastery dedicated to the pursuit of hidden truth, every surface covered with the tools and detritus of obsessive investigation. The apartment reflected his singular focus. Pizza boxes stacked like ancient monuments between towers of computer equipment, energy drink cans forming metallic armies across every surface, and cables snaking through the darkness like digital veins feeding his electronic ecosystem. His only companions were the hum of cooling fans working overtime to prevent his overclocked processors from melting down, and the occasional, satisfied grunt when another firewall fell to his expertise. The basement location was perfect for his needs, thick concrete walls that muffled sound and blocked electromagnetic interference, a dedicated power line that could handle his massive electrical requirements, and most importantly, no windows for curious neighbours to peer through. He'd been living there for 18 months, ever since his release from prison, paying cash to a landlord who asked no questions as long as the rent arrived on time. His setup was a temple to digital paranoia, 17 monitors arranged in a semicircle around his custom-built chair, each screen dedicated to different aspects of his ongoing investigations. 3 keyboards allowed him to manage multiple intrusion attempts simultaneously, while a collection of smartphones, each running different operating systems and connected to various networks through proxy chains, kept him connected to his sources around the globe. The walls were lined with hard drives, each containing terabytes of encrypted data collected from years of systematic investigation. Backup systems ensured that even if authorities raided the apartment, copies of everything would remain safely hidden in data centres across 3 continents. He'd learned from his previous arrests that physical evidence was only as secure as your ability to keep it out of enemy hands. Tonight felt different. As rain drummed against the boarded windows, he'd covered them himself for security reasons. Elias's automated scanners detected something unusual. The software he'd written monitored thousands of government servers simultaneously, looking for anomalous data signatures that might indicate classified information stored in supposedly routine systems. Most alerts were false positives, but after years of refinement, his algorithms had learned to distinguish between genuine anomalies and random digital noise. This particular signal was trying too hard to look ordinary, which was exactly what made it suspicious. A government proxy server deep within the Department of Homeland Security's network infrastructure was handling traffic patterns that didn't match any known legitimate use. The data packets were the right size and frequency to appear routine, but they carried encryption signatures that suggested military-grade security protecting something far more sensitive than typical administrative communications. Most hackers would have dismissed it as a honeypot, a trap designed to lure in digital intruders, but Elias had learned to read between the digital lines over years of careful observation. This signal felt different, older, like it had been running for decades without anyone paying attention to what it was actually protecting. He leaned back in his chair, cracking his knuckles with the deliberate ritual of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. The proxy was 3 layers deep in government infrastructure, protected by military-grade encryption that would take months to crack through conventional means. But Elias had developed unconventional means over the years. His fingers resumed their dance, this time with the measured precision of a master pianist performing a familiar concerto. Code flowed across his screens like poetry written in ones and zeros, each line bringing him closer to whatever lay hidden in the digital vault. As the final encryption layer crumbled at 3:47 a.m, Elias held his breath. The archive that materialized before him contained terabytes of data, but it was the file structure that made his pulse quicken. Everything was organized with the kind of meticulous care reserved for the most sensitive operations. Categorical folders with cryptic names like cultural implementation, behavioral modification, and asset management. He opened the first file and the world as he understood it began to unravel. The contracts appeared first, hundreds of them, stretching back decades like a paper trail through the shadow history of American culture. Entertainment companies, advertising agencies, record labels, movie studios, television networks, and news corporations, all bound by identical non-disclosure agreements that ran to thousands of pages each. The legal language was deliberately obscure, buried in terminology that would confuse even experienced corporate lawyers who specialized in media contracts. But Elias had taught himself to decode legal doublespeak during his prison sentence, spending countless hours in the law library learning how power structures protected themselves through linguistic camouflage. Each contract referenced cultural programming initiatives and synchronized messaging protocols, with payment structures that dwarfed typical entertainment industry deals. Millions of dollars flowing to seemingly random projects, indie films that barely recouped production costs, music albums that never charted, advertising campaigns for products that didn't seem to exist. All payments were approved by a shell company called Apex Cultural Dynamics, whose corporate registration traced through a labyrinthine network of offshore entities. Elias followed the money trail through banks in Switzerland, shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, trust funds in Luxembourg, and holding companies in jurisdictions he'd never heard of. Every lead ultimately vanished into legal structures so complex they seemed designed more for obfuscation than profit. The internal memos were more revealing, written in the casual tone of executives who felt completely secure in their communications. Corporate leaders from supposedly competing companies discussed narrative adjustments and public sentiment cultivation, like weather forecasters predicting next week's conditions. One memo from a major news network's CEO, dated just 6 months ago, read, "Per our discussion with ACD representatives, the upcoming election cycle requires a 15% increase in anxiety-inducing content during primetime hours. Latest psychological impact studies suggest optimal effectiveness when paired with consumer advertising for comfort products and security solutions." Another memo from a streaming entertainment company outlined specific quotas. Q3 targets include 40% increase in dystopian future programming, 25% increase in surveillance state normalization themes, an introduction of transhumanist concepts through minimum of 12 original series. Demographic targeting should focus on the 18 to 34 age range for maximum long-term conditioning effectiveness. The coordination between supposedly independent media companies was breathtaking in scope. Competing networks shared detailed viewer psychological profiles, coordinated their news coverage to maximize specific emotional responses, and even synchronized their entertainment programming to reinforce particular worldviews. The memos discussed marketing research into subliminal messaging techniques, optimal timing for narrative reinforcement, and methods for making propaganda indistinguishable from organic cultural trends. Video stills scattered throughout the files showed meetings in nondescript conference rooms. Faces were often obscured, but the visible details painted a chilling picture. Executives from competing companies sitting side by side, reviewing presentations with titles like Mass Behavioral Prediction Models and Subliminal Integration Techniques. But it was the symbols that made Elias's blood run cold. They appeared everywhere, in corporate logos embedded in document headers, even watermarked into video files. The all-seeing eye perched atop pyramids, numerical sequences that corresponded to occult traditions, and geometric patterns that seemed random until viewed through the lens of esoteric knowledge. As dawn broke unnoticed outside his boarded windows, Elias began constructing his theory. The Illuminati weren't just folklore, they were real, organised, and operating in plain sight. Rather than ruling through force or political manipulation, they had evolved into something far more sophisticated. Cultural engineers who shaped reality through the careful manipulation of information and entertainment. The fragments suggested a coordinated effort spanning decades. Movies that promoted specific worldviews, music that carried subliminal messages, news coverage that guided public opinion toward predetermined conclusions. Every major cultural event seemed to serve a purpose beyond mere profit or entertainment. Elias created a new encrypted partition on his most secure drive and began organising the evidence. Each piece of the puzzle revealed new connections, new layers of coordination that defied conventional understanding of how media and culture operated. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying, but this was just the first door. As he prepared to dive deeper into the archive, a notification appeared on his screen. New files were uploading automatically to the server, added in real time from sources around the globe. The conspiracy wasn't just historical, it was happening now, every day, with machine-like precision. Elias smiled grimly and opened another energy drink. He had work to do. 3 days of continuous analysis revealed patterns so pervasive they defied coincidence. Elias's custom data mining algorithms had processed thousands of hours of Super Bowl halftime shows, major film releases, top-charting music, and primetime television programming, cross-referencing them with the archived documents he'd discovered. His software compared visual elements, audio frequencies, narrative structures, and symbolic content with mathematical precision that human observation alone could never achieve. The results were undeniable and terrifying. Every major halftime show since 2005 contained specific visual elements that served purposes beyond entertainment. Choreographed movements formed geometric patterns when viewed from aerial cameras, patterns that matched sacred geometry principles known to influence human consciousness. Lighting sequences pulsed at precisely calibrated frequencies, 10 Hz to induce alpha brain states associated with relaxation and suggestibility, 40 Hz bursts to trigger gamma waves linked to heightened emotional responses, and infrasound frequencies below human hearing that created subliminal anxiety responses. The costume designs weren't random fashion choices. They incorporated symbols from the archived files with mathematical precision. Ancient Egyptian imagery, Masonic symbols, occult numerology, but presented in ways that bypassed conscious recognition. The performers themselves were likely unaware of the deeper significance, but the production companies certainly understood every detail. Internal emails discussed symbolic integration quotas and archetypal reinforcement targets with the clinical precision of pharmaceutical dosing guidelines. Hollywood's role was even more sophisticated, operating as a vast conditioning apparatus disguised as entertainment. Elias discovered that blockbuster films weren't just profitable products. They were psychological programming exercises designed to shift public consciousness over decades. Action movies systematically normalized surveillance states, extrajudicial violence, and the acceptability of authoritarian responses to perceived threats. Romantic comedies promoted specific relationship models that prioritize consumption, instant gratification, and emotional instability over lasting partnership and family formation. Science fiction films served as perhaps the most insidious tool of all. They introduced technological and social concepts years before their real-world implementation, ensuring public acceptance when they finally emerged. Movies about neural implants preceded actual brain-computer interface development by exactly the time needed for audience conditioning. Films depicting cashless societies appeared precisely when digital currency infrastructure was being developed. Dystopian scenarios were presented as cautionary tales, while simultaneously making the depicted future seem inevitable and acceptable. The music industry operated as the most direct delivery system for repetitive psychological messaging. Elias's analysis revealed that hit songs across all genres shared common structural elements designed to trigger specific neurological responses. Repetitive hooks created obsessive thought patterns, bass frequencies induced physical arousal responses, and lyrical themes consistently promoted materialism, emotional chaos, instant gratification, and distrust of traditional social bonds. Chart success wasn't organic. It was engineered through coordinated promotion campaigns that used psychological manipulation techniques, refined through decades of marketing research. Record companies employed neuroscience consultants who designed songs to be literally addictive, triggering dopamine responses that created compulsive listening behaviours. The most successful artists weren't necessarily the most talented. They were the most effective delivery vehicles for predetermined psychological content. But the most chilling discovery came when Elias cross-referenced celebrity deaths with financial markets and policy implementations, using algorithms that could detect correlations across vast datasets that human analysis would miss. The patterns were subtle but statistically undeniable. Whenever a particularly influential public figure died under questionable circumstances, the news cycle would shift dramatically within hours. Public attention would focus intensely on mourning and memorial coverage, while significant legislation passed through Congress, with minimal scrutiny or public debate. Michael Jackson's death had coincided with the most controversial aspects of healthcare reform debates, providing a massive distraction precisely when public opposition was reaching critical mass. Whitney Houston's demise dominated headlines during crucial banking regulation discussions that would have reshaped Wall Street oversight. Prince's passing created a week-long media obsession that completely buried coverage of surveillance law expansions that civil liberties groups had been fighting for months. Each event generated exactly the right emotional state to facilitate predetermined political outcomes. The deaths created collective grief that made the public more passive and receptive to authority, while the intensive media coverage consumed the attention bandwidth that might otherwise have focused on policy changes. The timing wasn't coincidental, it was orchestrated with mathematical precision. Elias found evidence suggesting that some celebrity deaths might have been actively induced rather than simply exploited. Medical records showed unusual patterns of prescription drug interactions. Security camera footage from crucial moments was consistently corrupted or missing, and autopsy results often contained anomalies that suggested external intervention. The pattern was consistent across dozens of cases spanning 3 decades. But even more disturbing was the systematic cultivation of celebrity instability. Internal documents from talent agencies and record companies outlined deliberate strategies for creating psychological dependence, drug addiction, and emotional instability in their most valuable assets. The goal wasn't profit maximization, it was creating performers who could be easily manipulated and, when necessary, destroyed at moments that served larger political purposes. The conspiracy had weaponized celebrity worship itself, turning the public's emotional investment in famous figures into a tool for mass psychological manipulation. Every death became a ritual that renewed the collective trauma bonding between citizens and their media-created gods, making the population more dependent on external authority figures and less capable of independent critical thinking. Elias created a digital conspiracy board on his largest monitor, a sprawling network of connections that would have impressed investigative agencies worldwide if they hadn't been complicit in the system he was mapping. Red lines linked entertainment companies to intelligence agencies through shared personnel, financial investments, and operational coordination. Blue lines traced money flows through the labyrinthine network of shell corporations, revealing how massive sums moved between seemingly unrelated organisations. Green lines mapped the precise timing of cultural events to policy implementations, showing correlation patterns that achieved statistical significance far beyond chance. The board revealed the Illuminati's true genius. They had weaponized human attention itself, transforming consciousness into a battlefield where wars were fought through carefully orchestrated information campaigns. In an age of information overload, controlling what people focused on had become more valuable than controlling what they thought. Distraction had evolved into the ultimate form of mind control, more effective than physical force because victims participated willingly in their own manipulation. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. Every major cultural trend of the past 30 years could be traced back to deliberate manipulation, orchestrated through the entertainment media complex. Fashion cycles that promoted specific body images and consumption behaviours. Social media trends that encouraged narcissistic self-documentation and reduced attention spans. Political movements that channeled genuine grievances into harmless symbolic protests that changed nothing. Even conspiracy theories themselves appeared to be guided phenomena, designed to discredit legitimate questioning by associating it with obviously false claims. As Elias studied his creation through bloodshot eyes that hadn't seen natural light in days, a pattern emerged that made him question everything he thought he knew about free will and human autonomy. The manipulation wasn't just cultural, it was neurological. The constant stream of engineered content was literally rewiring human brains on a species level, creating generations of people whose thoughts and desires had been shaped by external forces since birth. The evidence suggested that the traditional concept of individual choice had become largely illusory. In a world where every piece of information was filtered through manipulated channels, where every cultural touchstone carried hidden programming, where every social trend was artificially generated, what did it mean to make an independent decision? The conspiracy had achieved something more insidious than totalitarianism. They had created voluntary slavery disguised as freedom of choice. As Elias studied his creation, a pattern emerged that made him question everything he thought he knew about free will. Every major cultural trend of the past 30 years could be traced back to deliberate manipulation. Fashion cycles, social media behaviours, political movements, even conspiracy theories, all potentially guided by the same hidden hand. The realization struck him like a physical blow. If they could control culture so completely, how could he be certain his own obsession with finding them wasn't part of their plan? The media conglomerate's server proved surprisingly easy to penetrate, which should have been Elias's first warning. Titan Communications owned 17 major news networks, 43 radio stations, controlling interests in 12 social media platforms, and content distribution deals with virtually every major streaming service. Their annual revenue exceeded the GDP of most small nations, and their influence over global information flow was effectively unparalleled in human history. Their security should have been impenetrable. Military contractors protected their networks. They employed former NSA specialists as cybersecurity consultants, and their server farms were housed in facilities that rivaled government installations. Yet Elias's intrusion tools sliced through their defences like a hot knife through butter, encountering minimal resistance and no countermeasures. It was almost as if they wanted him inside their systems. The internal documents were even more damning than the government archive, revealing coordination that made wartime propaganda efforts look amateur by comparison. Daily emails outlined narrative priorities for each news cycle, complete with psychological impact assessments, demographic targeting strategies, and measurable public sentiment targets. The language was coldly clinical, reducing human emotion and belief to data points on quarterly performance spreadsheets. Editorial meetings were recorded and transcribed with military precision. News directors from supposedly competing networks participated in weekly coordination calls, where they discussed upcoming stories, agreed on messaging frameworks, and divided coverage responsibilities to ensure comprehensive narrative saturation. The goal wasn't profit, It was behavioural modification on a civilizational scale. One particularly chilling document was titled MK Ultra Evolution: Modern Behavioural Modification Through Repetitive Exposure. It outlined techniques that made the CIA's infamous mind control experiments look primitive and inefficient by comparison. Rather than targeting individuals through drugs and trauma, the new methods focused on mass psychological conditioning through carefully orchestrated media campaigns that operated below the threshold of conscious awareness. The manual explained in disturbing detail how repetitive exposure to specific imagery, sound frequencies, narrative structures, and emotional triggers could alter brain chemistry over extended periods. Citizens weren't being brainwashed in the traditional sense. They were being neurologically rewired through their daily media consumption, with changes that accumulated gradually over years and decades. The process was so subtle and pervasive that victims never realised their thoughts weren't entirely their own. Predictive programming emerged as a central technique in their arsenal. By introducing concepts, technologies and social changes through fictional entertainment before implementing them in reality, the manipulators could bypass critical thinking entirely. Audiences would unconsciously accept new surveillance technologies, social norms and political systems because they had been psychologically prepared through years of entertainment conditioning that made the changes feel familiar and inevitable. The technique was devastatingly effective because it exploited fundamental aspects of human psychology. People naturally accepted ideas they had encountered multiple times, even if the initial exposure came through obviously fictional sources. The brain treated repeated fictional scenarios as potential realities, creating neural pathways that made actual implementation feel like a natural progression rather than a radical change. The financial section revealed the true scope of the operation. Trillions of dollars flowed through the network annually, dwarfing the budgets of most nations. The money came from unexpected sources: pension funds, insurance companies, even charitable foundations unknowingly contributed to the conspiracy through complex investment structures. But the most disturbing discovery was the coordination between intelligence agencies, banking institutions, entertainment corporations and technology companies, operating as a unified organism despite their apparent competition and conflicting interests. Weekly video conferences brought together representatives from the CIA, Federal Reserve, major studios, social media platforms, and multinational technology corporations. They discussed sentiment management and narrative synchronization with the casual professionalism of corporate executives planning quarterly sales targets. The recordings revealed a shadow government that operated through corporate proxies rather than official political channels. Traditional governmental power had been largely superseded by a network of private organisations that could implement policy through market manipulation and cultural conditioning without the messy inconvenience of democratic oversight. Elections still occurred, but they had become elaborate theatre productions designed to maintain the illusion of popular sovereignty, while real decisions were made in boardrooms that the public never saw. News cycles weren't random or market-driven. They were orchestrated months in advance by committees that included intelligence operatives, banking executives, media moguls, and technology leaders. Wars provided distraction from economic manipulation, while generating massive profits for defence contractors. Celebrity scandals offered convenient cover for political corruption investigations. Natural disasters created opportunities to implement emergency powers that somehow always became permanent fixtures of the expanded surveillance state. Every major event served multiple purposes in a grand design that stretched across decades. The 2008 financial crisis had been engineered to consolidate banking power while conditioning the public to accept bailouts as normal economic policy. The COVID-19 pandemic had accelerated digital transformation initiatives while normalising remote monitoring and social isolation. Climate change narratives were being used to justify energy sector reorganisation and carbon credit markets that would generate enormous profits for the same financial institutions that had caused previous economic crises. Elias found recorded conversations between news anchors and their handlers that destroyed any remaining illusion about journalistic integrity. popular television personalities who projected authority and trustworthiness were revealed as knowing participants in psychological manipulation campaigns, carefully crafting emotional triggers with the precision of weapons designers. They discussed techniques for inducing specific brain states in viewers, optimal timing for fear-based messaging, and methods for making propaganda indistinguishable from legitimate news reporting. The most chilling recordings involve discussions of population control strategies disguised as public health initiatives. Representatives from pharmaceutical companies, government health agencies, and media corporations coordinated messaging campaigns designed to promote dependency on medical interventions while discouraging natural immunity and traditional healing practices. The goal wasn't public health. It was creating a population that required constant pharmaceutical management to function normally. Mental health treatment had been weaponized through carefully designed chemical interventions that didn't cure underlying problems but created permanent pharmaceutical dependencies. Educational systems were being restructured to produce workers who could follow complex instructions but lacked the critical thinking skills to question authority. Even exercise and nutrition guidelines were manipulated to ensure that optimal physical and mental health remained just out of reach for the general population. The evidence was overwhelming, but as Elias prepared to copy the files to his secure drives, an error message appeared. Access denied. User privileges revoked. The server was locking him out in real time, which meant someone was actively monitoring his intrusion. He worked frantically to extract what data he could, but the digital walls were closing in. As the connection terminated, one final document appeared briefly on his screen. A personnel file with his photograph and the header Asset Management, Elias Corin. Status: Active Monitoring. The file vanished before he could read it completely, but the implications were clear. They knew he was coming. Desperation drove Elias deeper into the network than he had ever dared venture. Using techniques that bordered on digital necromancy, he resurrected connection pathways that should have been impossible to access. The risk was enormous. Each probe left digital fingerprints that could lead authorities directly to his door. But the glimpse of his own file had transformed his quest from curiosity to survival. The recordings he discovered in the deepest server vaults were audio files from meetings that shouldn't have existed, according to any official record. High-definition audio captured conversations between intelligence officials, Federal Reserve board members, entertainment executives, technology billionaires, pharmaceutical industry leaders, and representatives from organizations he'd never heard of, but whose influence seemed to span continents. They discussed the future of human consciousness like generals planning military campaigns against an enemy population. The meetings followed a rigid schedule. Every third Wednesday of each month, participants would gather in a location identified only as the facility to review progress on what they called the Integration Project. The audio quality suggested advanced surveillance equipment, possibly indicating that someone within their organization was documenting everything for purposes that remained unclear. One recording from a meeting dated 6 months ago made his blood freeze in his veins. Phase 7. Implementation has exceeded all projections, reported a woman's voice that analysis software identified as belonging to a major pharmaceutical company executive. Antidepressant dependency rates have reached 23% of the adult population in target demographics. Cognitive function degradation is proceeding on schedule, with marked decreases in long-term planning abilities and resistance to authority structures. Another voice, male with a distinctive southern accent. The cryptocurrency infrastructure is approaching full readiness for behavioral tracking integration. Once we achieve real-time monitoring of every financial transaction, thought control becomes mathematically precise. Every purchase will inform our psychological profiles. Every payment will be subject to conditional approval based on compliance metrics. Money itself becomes the ultimate surveillance and control mechanism. A third voice, older and carrying unmistakable authority. Excellent progress. The entertainment division reports successful integration of transhumanist themes across all major platforms. Public acceptance of neural interface technology has increased 23% since the campaign began, with particularly strong adoption rates among the 18 to 34 demographic. We're ready for beta testing in select metropolitan markets next quarter. The conversations continued for hours, revealing a surveillance state that made Orwell's 1984 look like a children's story. They weren't just watching citizens, they were psychologically profiling entire populations in real time, predicting dissent before it emerged, and neutralizing threats through targeted manipulation rather than direct confrontation. The system was so sophisticated that most people would never realize they were living under complete psychological control. The integration project appeared to be the culmination of decades of research into human behavior modification. Rather than controlling people through force or obvious propaganda, they had created a system that guided human decision-making through carefully crafted environmental pressures. Every choice citizens made was influenced by factors they never recognized as external manipulation, creating the illusion of free will while ensuring predetermined outcomes. Food additives that affected brain chemistry, architectural designs that induced specific emotional states, lighting frequencies that influenced circadian rhythms, sound pollution calibrated to create chronic stress. Every aspect of modern life had been optimized to create psychological conditions that made populations easier to manage. The genius was that victims participated willingly in their own subjugation, often defending the very systems that enslaved them. The Watcher Protocol emerged as their most sophisticated tool. Rather than silencing conspiracy theorists and dissidents, they monitored them continuously, studying their methods and psychology. The dial was used to identify others with similar thinking patterns, creating detailed maps of potential resistance before it could organize effectively. But the most chilling revelation was their approach to handling discovered threats. They didn't assassinate or imprison troublesome individuals. They drove them insane. Subtle psychological pressure, engineered coincidences, and carefully orchestrated personal tragedies would destroy a person's credibility and mental stability. Victims became their own worst enemies, discrediting themselves more effectively than any external force could. Elias found case studies documenting the destruction of dozens of individuals who had gotten too close to the truth. Journalists who suffered sudden career implosions, researchers who developed inexplicable mental health problems, hackers who became paranoid and unstable. The pattern was consistent. Initial discovery, followed by escalating pressure until the subject either retreated into obscurity or self-destructed publicly. As he absorbed this information, strange coincidences began occurring in his own life. His internet connection inexplicably slowed at crucial moments. Phone calls developed electronic interference. His food delivery orders were mysteriously cancelled or delayed. Each incident was minor and easily dismissed as random bad luck, but the cumulative effect was unmistakable. Someone was watching. Elias tried to dismiss his growing paranoia as a natural reaction to the disturbing information he was processing. But late at night, when the city was quiet and his monitors provided the only light, he sometimes heard footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment. They would pause at his door for exactly 30 seconds before continuing down the corridor. The recordings had mentioned something else, something that made his hands shake as he worked. Subject 347 shows exceptional pattern recognition abilities. Psychological profile suggests high probability of success in reaching final verification stage. Recommend maintaining current stimuli until extraction protocols can be implemented. He had no way of knowing for certain, but the timing suggested a horrible possibility. He might be Subject 347. The decision to leak his findings publicly felt like stepping off a cliff. Elias had accumulated enough evidence to expose a conspiracy that dwarfed anything in human history, but he knew that releasing it would likely cost him his life, or worse, his sanity. Yet the alternative was remaining silent while humanity sleepwalked toward a digital totalitarianism that would make physical oppression obsolete. He began by seeding information across the dark web's most secure forums, using identity masking techniques that should have made him untraceable. The posts were carefully crafted to appear as random discoveries by different users, avoiding the pattern recognition algorithms that monitored conspiracy communities. Each fragment of evidence was real but incomplete. requiring readers to connect the dots themselves. The response was immediate and disturbing. His posts gained traction quickly, too quickly. Within hours, they were being shared across platforms, analysed by citizen journalists, and discussed in mainstream media as examples of dangerous misinformation. The speed of the reaction suggested a coordinated response, as if the revelation had been anticipated and prepared for in advance. More troubling was the nature of the responses. While some users took the evidence seriously, others immediately began discrediting it with arguments that seemed too sophisticated to be spontaneous. They pointed to technical inconsistencies that Elias was certain didn't exist, questioned source authenticity with forensic expertise that suggested professional training, and redirected discussions toward harmless tangents that neutered the information's impact. Within days, his revelations were being treated as another internet conspiracy theory, filed alongside flat earth theories and lizard people claims. The evidence was dismissed not through logical refutation, but through association with obviously false ideas, a technique the archived documents had called cognitive contamination. As the online discussions evolved, Elias realised he was watching a masterpiece of psychological manipulation in real time. The truth was being buried not through censorship, but through calculated flooding with disinformation. His genuine evidence was drowning in a sea of deliberate nonsense, making it impossible for reasonable people to distinguish fact from fantasy. But the digital warfare was only the beginning. Physical reality began shifting around him in subtle but unmistakable ways. His internet speed slowed to a crawl whenever he tried to upload new evidence. Delivery services could no longer find his address. His phone developed a mysterious static that made conversations nearly impossible. Even his electricity began fluctuating at random intervals, causing his equipment to crash at the most inconvenient moments. The psychological pressure was more sophisticated than anything he had imagined from the case studies. Rather than obvious intimidation, he faced a constant series of minor inconveniences and technical failures that could be dismissed as coincidence by anyone who wasn't experiencing them directly. The effect was maddening, literally. He began questioning his own perceptions, wondering if paranoia was making him see patterns that didn't exist. Sleep became elusive as his apartment filled with unexplained sounds. Electronics hummed at frequencies that seemed designed to prevent rest. The heating system cycled erratically, creating temperature fluctuations that made comfort impossible. Water pressure dropped whenever he tried to shower, and his refrigerator developed a whine that stopped only when he was away from his computer. Friends and family members began expressing concern about his mental state, though he couldn't remember telling them about his research. They called with surprising frequency, all using similar language about the importance of seeking help and taking breaks from the computer. The conversations felt scripted, as if his loved ones were reading from prepared statements. As days blended into a haze of technical failures and social pressure, Elias realised he was living inside one of the case studies he'd discovered. They weren't just monitoring him, they were actively dismantling his life with surgical precision. But unlike the previous victims, he knew what was happening. That knowledge might be his only chance of survival. He had to reach the final layer of the archive before they completed their psychological destruction. If his theory was correct, the deepest files would contain the ultimate revelation, and possibly his salvation. The final server required every technique Elias had learned over 2 decades of hacking. Protected by quantum encryption, and guarded by AI systems that adapted to his intrusion attempts in real time, it represented the pinnacle of digital security. Yet as he worked through the night, fueled by desperation and the last of his energy drinks, the barriers fell with almost suspicious ease. The locked folder contained exactly what he had expected and feared: complete dossiers on hundreds of individuals, including himself. His file was massive, containing information that should have been impossible to collect. Screenshots of every computer session going back years, audio recordings from devices that shouldn't have had microphones, even biometric data tracking his health and emotional states in real time. But it was the analysis that truly horrified him. Psychological profiles predicted his behaviour with uncanny accuracy, mapping his personality down to neurological quirks that he had never shared with anyone. The files detailed his childhood trauma, relationship patterns, cognitive biases, and emotional triggers with clinical precision. They knew him better than he knew himself. The surveillance had begun long before his current investigation. Webcam captures showed him staring at monitors in his apartment, taken from angles that suggested multiple hidden cameras. Phone conversations with friends and family had been recorded and analysed for stress patterns and emotional manipulation opportunities. Even his online shopping habits, medical records, and financial transactions had been fed into behavioural prediction algorithms. Most disturbing was the timeline. The earliest entries in his file dated back 15 years, to when he had first begun investigating conspiracy theories as a college student. They hadn't just discovered his activities, they had been watching and shaping them from the beginning. Every major breakthrough in his hacking skills, every connection he had made in underground communities, every piece of evidence he'd uncovered, all had been carefully orchestrated. The documents revealed the true scope of his manipulation. The pharmaceutical company he had exposed years earlier, the leaked documents had been strategically placed for him to find. The wrongful arrest that had cost him his fortune, engineered to isolate him and fuel his paranoia. Even his current apartment had been selected for him, the basement location perfect for the psychological pressure techniques they planned to employ, but the most shattering revelation was still to come. As he scrolled through terabytes of personal data, a video file caught his attention. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 days ago, the night he had first accessed the government server. The video showed him working at his computer, but the angle was impossible. The camera had to be inside his monitor, watching him as he discovered the conspiracy. He was staring at footage of himself reading about his own surveillance. The video continued, showing him creating his digital conspiracy board, making connections between entertainment companies and intelligence agencies, even the moment when he had first seen his own photograph in the corporate files. But there was something else, a timestamp in the corner that made no sense. According to the file properties, the video had been created 6 months before it was allegedly recorded. His hand shaking, Elias cross-referenced the timestamp with other files in his dossier. The pattern that emerged destroyed everything he thought he knew about his investigation. Every revelation, every breakthrough, every piece of evidence he had discovered, all had been prepared in advance. The conspiracy he had uncovered was real, but his discovery of it had been choreographed down to the minute. They hadn't just been watching him, they had been directing him, feeding him information at precisely calculated intervals, allowing him to feel the satisfaction of discovery while ensuring he found only what they wanted him to find. His entire investigation was a performance, and he had been playing his role perfectly. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment was no longer mysterious. It was his cue that the final act was about to begin. The timestamp that shattered Elias's world appeared in a routine system log, buried among thousands of other entries he might have overlooked in his haste to process the overwhelming data. But his pattern recognition skills, honed by decades of digital archaeology, caught the anomaly immediately. His surveillance file had been created 3 years before he had even begun his serious investigation into secret societies. Not updated, not modified, created. The implications spread through his mind like digital wildfire. Every forum post that had sparked his interest, every breadcrumb of evidence he had followed, every contact who had guided him toward new information sources, all had been carefully planted elements in an elaborate psychological experiment. He wasn't hunting the Illuminati. He was their laboratory rat, navigating a maze they had constructed specifically for him. The files reveal the true scope of the operation. Project Cassandra aimed to study how individuals with specific psychological profiles could be guided toward predetermined conclusions while believing they were conducting independent research. Elias was test subject 347 in a series that had already processed thousands of potential dissidents, conspiracy theorists, and amateur investigators. The methodology was diabolical in its sophistication. Rather than suppressing information, they had created controlled leaks that satisfied the subject's desire for hidden truth, while ensuring that any revelations served their ultimate purposes. every conspiracy theorist who believed they had uncovered secret plots was actually participating in a massive behavioural study that helped refine mass manipulation techniques. But Project Cassandra served another purpose, creating the perfect patsies. When subjects like Elias inevitably attempted to share their discoveries, the public would dismiss them as delusional paranoids. The conspiracy theorists discredited themselves more effectively than any government censorship could, providing cover for the real operations happening in plain sight. The genius was circular. They used genuine conspiracies to hide their conspiracy to create conspiracy theories. The Ouroboros of manipulation consumed its own tail while strengthening the head. Elias found video recordings of planning meetings where researchers discussed his psychological profile like entomologists studying an insect. His obsessive personality, his need for validation through intellectual superiority, his isolation and distrust of mainstream society, all were noted as advantageous traits for the experiment. They had identified him as an ideal subject before he had even begun his journey into the digital underground. The recordings were clinical in their detachment. Subject 347 shows exceptional persistence and pattern recognition abilities. Recommend accelerating the revelation timeline to achieve maximum psychological impact. His technical skills allow for more sophisticated evidence plants than previous subjects. Agreed. The deep web forums are seeded and ready. Will allow him to discover the entertainment industry connections next week, followed by the financial networks the following month. Estimated timeline to complete breakdown, 6 to 8 months. What about extraction? Standard protocol. Once he achieves full paranoid state, we'll activate the final revelation. The cognitive dissonance should ensure complete psychological collapse within 72 hours. Subject will either retreat into catatonic withdrawal or self-eliminate. Either outcome serves project goals. The footsteps outside his door had stopped. In the silence that followed, Elias could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears like a countdown timer. Every shadow in his peripheral vision might be a hidden observer. Every electronic device could be a surveillance tool. Even his own thoughts felt compromised, infected by the knowledge that his mind had been invaded and mapped by researchers who understood his psychology better than he did. But as despair threatened to overwhelm him completely, a final realization emerged from the chaos of his collapsing worldview. If they had created all of this as an experiment, if his investigation was a carefully orchestrated performance, then the evidence he had found might be real after all. They couldn't manipulate him with fake conspiracies. They had to use genuine ones to make the manipulation believable. The entertainment industry coordination, the financial manipulation, the psychological conditioning of entire populations, it was all real. His discovery of it might have been staged, but the conspiracy itself existed exactly as he had uncovered it. They had made one critical error in their psychological experiment. They had given him access to the truth. The question was whether that knowledge could serve any purpose now that he understood his role as an unwitting puppet. As the footsteps resumed outside his door, moving with deliberate slowness toward his apartment, Elias realized he had perhaps minutes to decide how this story would end. He could retreat into madness as they expected, becoming another cautionary tale about the dangers of conspiracy thinking. He could attempt to fight back, though they had mapped every aspect of his psychology and would anticipate any strategy he might devise. Or he could find a third option, something they hadn't planned for because it lay outside their understanding of his character. The gentle knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. A voice, polite and professional, spoke through the thin wood. "Mr. Corrin, we need to talk." Elias looked at his screens one final time, at the conspiracy board that had consumed his life, at the evidence that proved humanity was being manipulated on a scale beyond historical precedent. Then he looked at his reflection in the dark monitor, the face of a man who had discovered that his greatest fear and greatest hope were the same thing. He had found the truth. The truth had been carefully crafted to find him. But perhaps, in that circular dance of manipulation and discovery, lay an opportunity that neither he nor his watchers had anticipated. After all, even the most sophisticated psychological experiment could produce unexpected results. As he reached for the door handle, Elias Corrines smiled for the first time in months. If they had taught him anything, it was that reality was far more malleable than most people believed, and if reality could be shaped, then perhaps it was time for the subject to become the experimenter. The door opened to reveal figures in dark suits, their faces professional masks hiding whatever emotions they might have felt. But as they looked into Elias's eyes, something shifted in their expressions, a flicker of uncertainty that suggested their psychological profiles might have missed something crucial about their carefully studied subject. "Gentlemen," Elias said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind, "I've been expecting you. Shall we discuss what happens next?" The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.